The Axis Corp office building seemed huge as I walked up to it, holding my resume folder. After 4 months without a job, I had almost no money left. My student loans kept piling up, and my landlord was getting impatient. My interview last week went really well, better than I thought it would. When they called offering me a job that paid almost 20% more than my old one, I just took it. I fixed my tie, something I do when I'm nervous, just like my dad used to. The lobby looked modern with lots of glass and steel, and a security guard with big shoulders checked my ID without smiling. "Thomas Miller for Roger Allen," I said, trying to sound confident. He made a call, handed me a visitor badge, then pointed toward the elevators. 14th floor. The elevator doors slid open to a typical office. Gray carpet, white walls, and a maze of cubicles. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and lines around his eyes waited by the receptionist's desk. He didn't offer a handshake. Thomas Miller. Right on time. His voice was gruff but not unfriendly. "I'm Roger Allen, Data Operations Manager, your direct supervisor." "Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I'm excited to join the team." Roger looked at me with an expression I couldn't figure out, then nodded toward a hallway. "Let's get you settled." I'd expected the standard first day, HR orientation, benefits enrollment, team introductions. Instead, Roger took me straight to a small cubicle with a computer that looked newly set up. "HR sent up your paperwork. Fill it out by lunch." He placed a manila folder on the desk. "Your login credentials are inside. The system will prompt you to change your password on first login." "Don't I need to go through orientation first?" Roger's jaw tightened slightly. "Our HR department has a different approach. You'll complete online modules this week." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What you do need right away are the departmental guidelines." I took the paper, expecting a list of standard procedures, dress code, lunch hours, reporting structure. Instead, there were just 4 numbered items. 1. Never enter the building before 7 a.m. 2. Always leave the building by 8 p.m. 3. Do not talk to extra team members. 4. Do not eat food left alone in break room areas. I looked up, waiting for the explanation or the rest of the list. Roger looked at me with a serious face. "These aren't suggestions, Miller. They're rules, non-negotiable ones." His tone left no room for debate. "Follow them without exception, no matter what." "Extra team members?" I asked, genuinely confused. "If you see someone who doesn't belong, don't engage. Report it to security." He checked his watch. "Any other questions about the rules?" I had dozens, but something about how he acted made me stop myself from asking them. "No, sir." "Good. Sarah Thompson from the analytics team will show you the database structures after lunch. Focus on getting your paperwork done and setting up your workstation this morning." With that, he walked away, leaving me alone at my new desk with a strange list of rules and a feeling that Axis Corp wasn't what I expected. I spent the morning filling out tax forms and benefit selections, sometimes looking at the rules Roger had given me. They seemed really specific, and how serious he was about them seemed weird. But my rent was due in a week, and my credit card was almost maxed out. Whatever odd things were happening at this company, the salary would fix my money problems. The office filled up slowly throughout the morning. People walked around looking busy, nodding at each other but rarely stopping to talk. I noticed a big wall clock you could see from almost every desk, and more than once I saw people checking their watches against it. At 12:30, a woman with light brown hair and a ponytail stopped by my cubicle. She had dark circles under her hazel eyes that made her look really tired. "Thomas Miller? I'm Sarah Thompson." Her smile seemed practiced. "Ready for the database walkthrough?" "Absolutely," I said, standing up. "And please, call me Tom." She nodded but didn't invite me to use her first name. "The conference room is this way." As we walked, I tried making small talk. "How long have you been with Axis Corp?" 3 years in June." Her reply was clipped, her eyes constantly moving, scanning our surroundings. "And how do you like it?" She paused before answering. "It's stable. Good benefits." Not exactly a ringing endorsement. When we got to the small conference room, she closed the door and started explaining the company's database setup. She definitely knew her stuff, walking me through the systems with clear explanations. About halfway through her presentation, I decided to ask a few questions. "So Roger gave me the 4 rules this morning," I said casually. Sarah's fingers froze on the keyboard. For a second, her professional attitude cracked, showing a flash of what looked like fear. "They're important," she said, her voice tight. "Very important. The one about extra team members seems strange. What exactly—" "The rules are there for a reason." She cut me off, her eyes darting to the door. "Following them is part of being successful here." "Right, but let's get back to the data integration process," she said, abruptly changing the subject. Her shoulders remained tense for the rest of our meeting. After the database training, I returned to my cubicle to set up my work email. As I organized my desk, I started to notice things I'd missed earlier. Security cameras were all over the office, but they seemed pointed at employees rather than doors or expensive equipment. People kept checking the time, and by 7:15 p.m. almost everyone had left. At 7:30 p.m. I packed up my stuff. Only a few employees were still there, and they all looked ready to go. Walking to the elevator, I passed some senior employees talking quietly together. "Marcus didn't listen," one of them said. "Stayed late every night last week. And now he's gone," another replied. "Cleaned out his desk yesterday." "That's the 3rd one this quarter," a third voice added. They stopped talking when they noticed me, offering tight smiles as I passed. In the elevator, I was with Roger. His tie was loosened and he looked tired. "How was your first day?" he asked, not looking at me. "Informative," I replied. "Everyone seems very punctual." He nodded slightly. "Efficiency is valued here." I couldn't help overhearing something about someone named Marcus. Roger's posture stiffened. "Office politics, nothing for you to worry about." The elevator reached the lobby, and he stepped out. 7 a.m. tomorrow, Miller, not a minute earlier. I watched him walk away. His warning stuck with me. On the train ride home, I thought about what I'd noticed. The strange rules, the tense atmosphere, the cryptic comments about Marcus. It all pointed to something unusual about Axis Corp. Under different circumstances, I might have considered looking elsewhere for employment. But when I checked my bank balance on my phone, reality hit hard. My account showed $127.43. Not enough for rent, not enough for the minimum payment on my student loans. The notification of an incoming direct deposit from Axis Corp in 2 weeks would change that. Whatever oddities existed at my new workplace, they paid well. And right now, that was what mattered most. The rules seemed simple enough to follow, even if I didn't understand their purpose. I ignored my worries. Every workplace had its quirks, its politics, its unwritten rules. I'd learned to deal with them, just as I'd gotten used to other corporate cultures before. What harm could come from following a few strange guidelines? Little did I know then that at Axis Corp, following the rules wasn't just about workplace etiquette or company policy. It was about survival. Exactly 7 days after my first day at Axis Corp, I pulled into the parking garage at 6:59 a.m. I sat in my car watching the dashboard clock until the display clicked over to 7, before stepping out. The concrete parking area was mostly empty, with only a dozen or so cars spread out in the early morning. I noticed something in the far corner. The security guard from my first day was walking around a dusty Toyota Corolla, writing something on a clipboard. His face looked blank, like he'd perfected that expression over time. "Morning," I said as I walked past, my messenger bag slung over my shoulder. He looked up, eyes quickly noticing my face and badge. "Mr. Miller, early bird today?" "Not too early," I answered, tapping my watch. 7 on the dot. Joseph nodded toward the Toyota. Know anything about Reynolds? Brian Reynolds? The name wasn't familiar. No, should I? New hire like you. Data analyst on the West Wing. He ran a hand over his short-cropped hair. This is his car. Been here since yesterday morning. I stopped walking. He didn't drive home last night. He came in at 6:45 yesterday. Security system logged his badge. Joseph's eyes met mine. Never logged out. I felt sick to my stomach. Maybe he got a ride with someone else. Maybe. Joseph didn't sound convinced. Building Services wants to know if they should call it in as abandoned. I looked at the car again. A gym bag was in the back seat. A parking ticket from 2 days ago was stuck under the windshield wiper. Small details that suggested its owner hadn't planned on leaving it. I didn't meet him yet, I said. Still learning who everyone is. Joseph nodded, making another note on his clipboard. Well, if you hear anything, let security know. I continued to the elevator, the information about Brian Reynolds turning over in my mind. As the doors closed, I remembered rule number 1. Never enter the building before 7 a.m. Brian had come in 15 minutes early. The workday started normally. I logged into my computer, checked my emails, and continued familiarizing myself with the database structure Sarah had shown me. Around 10 a.m., an email from Human Resources appeared in everyone's inbox. Please be advised that Brian Reynolds has resigned from his position, effective immediately. His responsibilities will be redistributed among the team until a replacement is hired. We wish him well in his future endeavors. Standard corporate language for someone who had quit without notice. I closed the email and got back to work, but couldn't shake the image of Brian's abandoned car in the parking garage. At lunch, I headed to the break room, careful not to take any food left unattended on the tables. The room was half full, conversations dropping to murmurs when I walked in. I recognized a guy from orientation who sat at a desk near Brian's. Hey, I said, sitting down with my brought-from-home sandwich. You work near Brian Reynolds, right? He looked up from his phone, eyes darting around before answering. Yeah, what about him? Just curious about the sudden resignation. Seems abrupt. Happens. He shrugged, his body language closing off. People come and go. His car is still in the parking garage. The man stood up, lunch half eaten. Look, I've got a meeting. He walked out, leaving me alone at the table. Throughout the afternoon, I tried to learn more about Brian, but everyone responded similarly, short answers followed by quick exits. By the end of the day, I had learned only that Brian was young, ambitious, and had mentioned staying late to catch up on work. As I packed up to leave, right at 7:30 p.m., I saw Roger standing near the elevators. His eyes followed me across the floor. Miller, he said as I approached. Settling in? Yes, sir. Getting there. His eyes were tired, the lines around them deeper than I remembered from last week. Saw you looking at Reynolds' car this morning. I hadn't realized he'd been in the garage. The security guard mentioned he came in early yesterday. Roger's jaw tightened. First rule exists for a reason, Miller. Without waiting for my response, he walked away, going around a corner. The weekend gave me time to think. Brian Reynolds had broken rule number 1 and was gone. The company claimed he resigned, but his car remained abandoned. No one wanted to talk about him. I felt more and more worried about Axis Corp. I opened my laptop and began searching for information about the company. Their public website showed the typical corporate talk, innovation, excellence, client satisfaction. Nothing unusual. I dug deeper, looking through business news archives and employee review sites. The patterns started to show up. Axis Corp had unusually high turnover rates compared to industry standards. Former employees left vague reviews mentioning strange workplace culture and arbitrary rules. One comment caught my attention. Follow their rules exactly or you won't last long. A few news articles mentioned workplace incidents at Axis Corp, though details were limited. 3 years ago, a police investigation followed after an employee went missing. but was closed without explanation. The building had changed ownership multiple times in its 20-year history, with Axis Corp occupying it for the last 8 years. Nothing I found explained the strict rules or the strange atmosphere, but everything pointed to something wrong at the company. Monday morning, I arrived at exactly 7 a.m. Brian's Toyota was still in the garage, but now had a notice taped to the windshield warning it would be towed in 48 hours, if not claimed. When I reached the 14th floor, a cleaning crew was emptying Brian's desk. They worked quickly, putting personal items in a cardboard box while wiping down surfaces. A family photo, a small desk plant, a Northwestern University mug. By the time I turned on my computer, all signs of Brian Reynolds were gone from the office. Sarah walked past my cubicle around noon, her steps speeding up when she saw me looking. "Sarah," I called, keeping my voice casual. "Got a second?" She hesitated before approaching, fingers nervously adjusting her watch. "What do you need, Thomas?" "Just wondering about Brian Reynolds. Did you work with him at all?" Her face tightened. "Not directly. Seems weird that his car's still here if he resigned." Sarah glanced around, then leaned closer. "Look, it's better not to ask questions about people who leave." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Just follow the rules. All of them, all the time." "No," she cut me off. "I don't. And if you want to last here, you won't either." She straightened up, resuming her professional demeanor. "Let me know if you need help with the quarterly report format." That evening, I stayed until 7:30, watching as the office emptied around me. The urgency with which people packed up and left by 7:45 was telling. No one wanted to risk breaking rule number 2. At home, I pulled out a small notebook and began documenting what I'd observed. I listed the 4 rules, then added notes about Brian Reynolds and his violation of Rule 1. I wrote down dates I'd gathered from news articles about past incidents at Axis Corp, trying to find patterns. Most employee departures followed unusual behavior, coming in too early, staying too late, or as mentioned in one review I'd found, talking to the wrong people. The rules weren't arbitrary corporate policies. They were survival mechanisms. I closed the notebook and made a decision. Whatever was happening at Axis Corp, whatever had happened to Brian Reynolds, I needed to protect myself. The salary was worth staying. My bank account was already looking healthier after just one paycheck, but not at the risk of disappearing like Brian. From now on, I would follow every rule to the letter, no exceptions, no matter what. I set multiple alarms on my phone, one for 6:55 a.m. to make sure I never arrived early, and another for 7:15 p.m. to ensure I was never caught leaving after 8 taui. The rules were clear. 1. Never enter the building before 7 a.m. 2. Always leave the building by 8 p.m. 3. Do not engage with extra team members. 4. Do not consume food left unattended in break room areas. Simple enough to follow, even if I didn't understand what they were protecting me from. Until I learned more about what was happening at Axis Corp, strict compliance was my best defense. 3 weeks into my new position at Axis Corp, I sat at my desk staring at my computer screen in growing frustration. The quarterly data migration report that Roger had assigned me that morning was proving more complex than anticipated. Each time I thought I'd completed a section, I discovered inconsistencies that required further investigation. I glanced at the wall clock, 7:15 p.m. The office had gotten quiet around me as my coworkers had left, everyone leaving faster as time went by. I was alone in my section now, the overhead lights buzzing softly in the silence. Since my discovery about Brian Reynolds, I'd been careful about following all 4 rules. I arrived at exactly 7 a.m. each morning, avoided any unattended food in the break room, and made sure to be heading to my car by 7:30 p.m. at the latest. I'd even started keeping my eyes down when walking through the building, afraid of seeing someone who might be an extra team member. But today's report couldn't wait. Roger had made that clear when he dropped it on my desk that morning. "The executive team needs this for their 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow," he'd said. his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Get it done, Miller." I checked my watch again and tried to focus. The database query I'd written pulled up another set of numbers that didn't match the previous quarter's figures. I'd need to dig deeper to find the source of the discrepancy. I felt torn between wanting to follow the rules and not wanting to mess up at my new job. "Just another 15 minutes, I muttered to myself. "I'll be cutting it close, but I can still make it out by 8. I dove back into the data, tracing the inconsistencies through multiple tables. The solution was harder to find than I'd expected, and I had to look up documentation and check historical reports. When I finally identified the issue, an improperly formatted date field causing transactions to be counted twice, I felt really good. It wasn't until I finished implementing the fix and ran the final validation that I checked the time again. The clock read 7:55 p.m. "Shit," I whispered, immediately saving my work and shutting down my computer. I got nervous as I packed my messenger bag, stuffing papers inside without bothering to organize them. 5 minutes to get out of the building. I could make it if I hurried. The elevator seemed to take forever to arrive. I jabbed the call button repeatedly, checking my watch with increasing anxiety. 7:58 p.m., 7:59 p.m. The elevator doors finally slid open and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. The digital display above the doors showed 8:01 p.m. just as I reached the 5th floor. The elevator jerked to a halt, the lights inside blinking before going dim. A moment later they came back on, but dimmer than before. The elevator remained motionless. I pressed the lobby button again. Nothing happened. I tried the door open button, then hit the emergency call button. No response. "Come on," I said, pressing buttons at random now. After what felt like minutes but was really just seconds, the elevator moved downward, then stopped at the 14th floor. The floor I'd just left. The doors opened with a soft chime that seemed weirdly normal. The office space was dark. The overhead lights that normally stayed on 24/7 were now less than half as bright as usual. The cubicles looked strange and unfamiliar in the dim light. I wasn't sure whether to stay in the elevator or try to find the stairs. The choice was made for me when the elevator doors closed again, but the car didn't move. The buttons didn't work. I pressed the door open button again, and the elevator opened back to the 14th floor. I didn't want to, but I stepped out. I noticed the cold right away. The office was always kept at a steady 72 degrees, but now the air felt way colder, maybe 50 degrees and damp, which made it feel even colder. I pulled my jacket tighter. Then I smelled it. A smell like rotten eggs filled the air, getting stronger every second. I covered my nose with my sleeve, trying not to throw up. I needed to find the stairwell. If I could get to the lobby, I could leave through the main doors. I started moving through the dark office, following the dim overhead lights. A sound made me stop. Heavy footsteps from the far corridor, the one that led to the executive offices. Slow, heavy steps that made the floor shake a little under my feet. Then came the laughter, a low, rough sound that didn't sound human. It reminded me of what a large dog might sound like if it could laugh, but weird with too many sounds at once. I didn't think. I just reacted. I ducked into the nearest cubicle, my own, and crawled under the desk, making myself as small as possible. I pulled my bag close and tried to breathe quietly, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the quiet office. The footsteps got closer, along with other sounds. Furniture being moved, objects falling to the floor. Whatever was out there was searching the office, going from cubicle to cubicle. I tried to track where it was just by listening, too scared to look out from my hiding spot. The footsteps and noise moved in a pattern. Down one row of cubicles, then the next, getting closer to where I was hiding. I heard a loud crash just 2 cubicles away, like a computer monitor being knocked off a desk. The rotten egg smell got stronger, and with it came another smell. Something rotting, like bad meat. The thing entered the cubicle next to mine. I could hear it breathing now, raspy, wet breaths that sounded like lungs full of fluid. It would breathe, then make loud sniffing sounds, like an animal tracking by smell. I pushed myself against the back of my hiding spot, trying to disappear into the cheap office furniture. The footsteps stopped just outside my cubicle. The sniffing got louder. Something moved into my workspace. From under the desk, I could only see part of the hallway and a strange shadow making the dim light even darker. Whatever made that shadow was big, bigger than a person. It sniffed again, taking a long breath that ended with a rough sound of interest. It had smelled me. The shadow moved further into my cubicle. I heard scratching on top of my desk, like claws or nails dragging across the surface. Papers fell to the floor. I was so scared I could barely breathe. The breathing came closer. The thing was bending down, about to look under the desk. I was so terrified that words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. "I'm not here," I whispered, immediately regretting making any sound at all. The entity froze. The breathing stopped. The air grew even colder, condensation forming on the metal parts of my chair. Long seconds passed in complete silence. Then, to my surprise, the shadow withdrew. The footsteps resumed, moving away from my cubicle, continuing down the row but without the previous searching behavior. I remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might draw its attention back to me. The footsteps and occasional sounds of disturbance grew more distant, eventually fading completely. Still, I didn't move. Only when the overhead lights blinked and returned to their normal brightness did I dare to check my watch. 8:30 p.m. I'd been hiding for nearly half an hour. The smell of sulfur had disappeared, and the temperature was returning to normal. Cautiously, I crawled out from under my desk and stood up, my legs stiff from being stuck in one position. The office looked normal except for the mess in several cubicles. Computer monitors lay smashed on the floor. Chairs were knocked over and papers were scattered everywhere. My own desk had papers thrown about, but nothing was broken. I didn't wait to look around more. I grabbed my bag and ran for the stairwell, taking the stairs 2 at a time down to the lobby. The night security guard looked up in surprise as I burst through the stairwell door, sweating and out of breath. "Everything okay, Mr. Miller?" he asked, reaching for his phone. "Fine," I managed, not slowing down as I headed for the exit. "Working late. Good night." I didn't stop running until I reached my car in the parking garage. Once inside, I locked the doors and sat there, hands shaking too badly to put the key in the ignition right away. When I finally managed to start the car and pull out of the garage, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every noise in my apartment building made me tense. I lay awake replaying what had happened, trying to make sense of it. What was that thing? Why had it seemed to listen when I'd told it I wasn't there? What would have happened if it had found me? The next morning I arrived at work at 7 a.m., exhausted but determined to maintain my routine. When the elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, I half expected to see the aftermath of destruction, but everything looked normal. The cubicles that had been searched were tidy, with computers intact and papers neatly stacked. I walked to my desk in a daze, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I sat down, I noticed that the papers on my desk were arranged differently than I'd left them, organized into neat piles rather than the chaotic mess I'd seen last night. Roger was waiting by my desk when I returned from getting coffee. His face was grim, eyes tracking my movements as I set down my mug. "You stayed late last night," he said. Not a question. I nodded, unable to find words at first. "The quarterly migration report. I lost track of time." "Until when?" "I tried to leave at 8 but the elevator..." I paused, wondering how much to say. The look in Roger's eyes decided me. Something was in the office last night, after 8. It searched the place, knocking things over. It almost found me hiding under my desk. Roger's expression didn't change, but the color drained from his face. "You saw it?" "No, just its shadow. I heard it moving around, smelled it, the sulfur." And how did you avoid it? I hesitated, feeling foolish. I told it I wasn't there, just whispered it, and it listened. It left. Roger took a deep breath, tension visible in his shoulders. Don't break Rule 2 again, Miller. You got lucky. Many haven't. What was it? I asked. Roger looked around the office, which was filling with arriving employees. Not here. He lowered his voice. Just follow the rules. All of them. No exceptions. He walked away without another word, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The rules weren't just random company policies. They were protection against whatever was in the building after hours. That afternoon, I set up multiple alarms on my phone, 7:10 p.m., 7:20 p.m., and 7:30 p.m., each with more urgent messages than the last. I programmed my computer to show a reminder at 7 p.m. I even set my watch to vibrate every 15 minutes after 7 p.m. From that day forward, I was never in the building past 7:30 p.m. Whatever report, project, or task wasn't finished would have to wait until morning. No deadline was worth facing that thing again. As I drove home that evening, well before sunset, I couldn't stop thinking about those whispered words, "I'm not here," and why they had worked. It seemed impossible, yet somehow the thing had listened, had accepted my denial of my own existence. The rules protected us, but I was starting to think they were just a temporary fix against something that had claimed the building as its own. Something that only came out after hours, looking for people who stayed too late. The stack of papers on my desk had grown since my encounter with the entity after hours. I'd buried myself in work during my 4th week at Axis Corp, arriving exactly at 7 a.m. and leaving by 7:30 p.m. without fail. The strict schedule had become my way to navigate this increasingly strange workplace without attracting unwanted attention. I was reviewing last quarter's financial projections when I noticed someone moving near my cubicle. Michael Parker walked past, nodding a casual greeting before continuing to the break room. I returned to my spreadsheet, but something bothered me. Something about Michael seemed off. 5 minutes later, I looked up as Michael passed by again, this time heading toward his desk. I blinked, suddenly alert. Hadn't he just gone to the break room? I hadn't seen him return. I looked confused, stood up and looked over my cubicle wall. Michael sat at his desk, typing at his computer. His auburn hair and gap-toothed smile looked the same as always when he glanced up and noticed me watching. He waved, friendly as ever. I didn't wave back. Instead, I pulled up the company directory on my computer and found Michael's profile. The photo showed his distinctive features: the thick framed glasses, the neatly trimmed beard, the gap between his front teeth. I looked back at the man sitting at Michael's desk. He looked almost the same, but now that I was paying attention, I noticed small differences. His beard was slightly fuller, the frames of his glasses thinner, and when he smiled at a passing coworker, I didn't see the gap in his teeth. I felt nervous as I remembered rule number 3. Do not talk to extra team members. I'd assumed extra team members meant unauthorized visitors or temporary workers. Now, staring at this almost but not quite Michael, I wondered if it meant something far more sinister. Throughout the morning, I watched the fake Michael's movements while pretending to work. He did Michael's job like he knew it well, attending meetings, making phone calls, and chatting with colleagues. No one seemed to notice anything unusual about him. He'd smile at me whenever our eyes met accidentally, and each time I quickly looked away, remembering the rule. By lunchtime, my neck hurt from stress. I took my homemade lunch and headed to the break room, choosing a seat with my back to the wall so I could watch the door. The fake Michael entered a few minutes later, carrying a sandwich from the cafe across the street. The same lunch the real Michael often brought. Sarah Thompson sat down beside me, her own lunch neatly packed in glass containers. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low. "You've been acting weird all morning." "Fine," I replied, not looking at her. My eyes were fixed on the imposter, who was now chatting easily with 2 developers from the web team. Is something wrong with Michael? Sarah followed my gaze. I turned to her, keeping my voice quiet. That's not Michael. Sarah looked confused. What are you talking about? He's sitting right there. Look closely, I urged. His beard is different. The glasses are wrong. That's not the Michael from the team photo. Sarah stared at the man for several seconds, then turned back to me, looking worried. Thomas, that's definitely Michael. Same as always. Why are you being rude to him? He said he waved at you twice and you completely ignored him. I felt sick. The fake Michael had been talking about me with Sarah. Trust me, something's not right. I kept my voice calm even though my mind was racing. That's not the real Michael Parker. Sarah's face changed from worry to nervousness. She packed up her lunch, though she'd barely touched it. Maybe you're working too hard, or not sleeping enough. She stood to leave, then paused. Remember what I told you about asking questions? Some things are better left alone. After she left, I avoided the break room for the rest of the day, eating what was left of my lunch at my desk. I kept my head down, focusing on my work while staying very aware of the fake Michael's movements around the office. Each time he walked past my cubicle, I could feel him watching me, though I never looked up to check. At 3:15 p.m., my desk phone rang. Roger's gruff voice came through the speaker. Conference room C now. I went to the conference room. Roger was already inside with the blinds drawn, looking serious. He motioned for me to sit without saying hello. You've noticed, he said, once I'd closed the door. The fake Michael, I nodded. No one else sees it. Roger's expression didn't change, but something like approval showed in his eyes. Most don't. Not until it's too late. He turned a laptop on the conference table, showing security video of the lobby. The timestamp read 7 a.m. that morning. The video showed Michael Parker entering the building, swiping his badge at the security desk. The guard nodded a greeting as Michael headed toward the elevators. Roger fast-forwarded 10 minutes. At 7:10 a.m., Michael Parker entered the building again, wearing the same clothes, swiping the same badge. Joseph nodded just as he had before, clearly not noticing that he'd already seen Michael that morning. 2 Michaels, I whispered. The second one is what we call an extra, Roger explained, closing the laptop. They appear periodically. Perfect copies, as far as most people can tell, but not to everyone. He looked at me with new interest. You saw the differences immediately. That's rare. What are they? My mouth felt dry. Roger leaned back in his chair. We don't know exactly. They mimic our employees, integrate themselves into the office. They're mostly harmless, until someone engages directly with them. What happens then? The person who engages disappears. Roger's tone was matter of fact. Sometimes within hours, sometimes days later, but they always disappear. The implications hit me. Brian Reynolds? Did he engage with an extra the day before he disappeared? Roger confirmed. Security footage showed him having a lengthy conversation with someone who looked exactly like me. I was in Chicago that day, at a conference. I remembered Brian's abandoned car in the parking garage. And Marcus? Same story, different extra. Roger rubbed his eyes, suddenly looking every one of his 50-plus years. That's why the rules exist, Miller. They're not corporate bullshit. They're survival mechanisms we figured out over years of incidents. Does HR know? The executives? Some do. Some don't want to. He stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. The important thing is, you noticed. Keep doing that, and remember Rule 3. No exceptions. Before opening the door, he added, and verify who exits the building with you. Always. The extras never leave through the main doors. They use other ways out. If you see someone heading to a service exit or stairwell at the end of the day, keep your distance. I returned to my desk in a daze, the reality of Axis Corp's supernatural problem becoming clearer, but no less terrifying. The rules weren't just important. They were literally life-saving protocols developed through tragedy and loss. At 7:25 p.m., I packed up my things following my strict routine. The office had emptied considerably, with only a few people still finishing up work. As I waited for the elevator, I noticed the fake Michael walking toward the parking garage elevators, several yards behind Alex Hayes. Alex had been friendly to me during my first few weeks. He often stopped by my cubicle to chat. He didn't like Roger's rules, frequently staying past 7:30 and sometimes taking food from the break room without checking who had left it. Now the imposter was following him, keeping a casual distance that wouldn't seem suspicious to someone unaware of the danger. I pulled out my phone and texted Alex. "The Michael behind you isn't real. Don't talk to him. Rule number 3. I watched Alex check his phone as he entered the elevator. He looked back at the fake Michael, then at me waiting by the main elevators. He rolled his eyes and typed a response. My phone buzzed with his reply. "You're taking these rules too seriously, man. Loosen up." The elevator doors closed, taking Alex and the imposter out of sight. I just stood there, not knowing what to do. Should I try to follow them? Call security? But what could I say that wouldn't sound insane to anyone who couldn't see the differences? My own elevator arrived, and I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I wondered if Alex would listen to my warning or if his not caring about the rules would get him into trouble he couldn't imagine. I spent the weekend thinking about Alex. Every hour or so, I checked my phone, hoping to see a text or missed call that would tell me he was safe. Nothing came. By Sunday night, I'd convinced myself he might not show up for work on Monday. Maybe he'd vanish like Brian Reynolds, his car left in the parking garage with a tow notice taped to the windshield. But Monday morning, Alex walked past my cubicle at 9:15 carrying coffee, looking completely normal. He nodded at me with his usual easy smile, showing no signs of distress. I felt so relieved. He'd survived his encounter with the fake Michael. "Morning," I said, fighting my urge to ask what had happened with the imposter. "Hey." He didn't stop walking, didn't mention my text warning. I wanted to pull him aside to make sure it was really him and not another copy. But the memory of Roger's warning kept me silent. Verify, but don't engage. Around 10:30, I went to the break room for coffee. The small room was empty, but something new sat on the center table, a chocolate cake in a clear plastic container. A yellow post-it note stuck to the top read, "Help yourself," in looping handwriting. The cake looked perfect, with smooth chocolate frosting and what looked like chocolate shavings decorating the top. The rich smell made my stomach growl. I hadn't eaten breakfast, and the aroma was hard to resist. I took another step toward the cake, then stopped. Rule number 4. Do not consume unattended food in break room areas. After my experience with the after-hours entity and learning about the extras, I wasn't taking any chances. I backed away from the cake and turned to the coffee machine, keeping my eyes on my mug as I filled it. The door opened behind me, and Alex walked in. He spotted the cake immediately, his face lighting up. "Sweet. Someone brought cake." He headed straight for it. "I wouldn't," I said, keeping my voice casual. "You know the rules." Alex rolled his eyes as he lifted the plastic cover. "These rules are just Roger's power trip. Come on, it's just cake. Someone's birthday, probably." "Still," I set my coffee down. "Rule 4 exists for a reason." "Like Rule 3? About your imaginary fake Michael?" Alex laughed, picking up a plastic knife that sat beside the cake. "I talked to Michael this morning. He said you've been acting weird around him for days." "That wasn't..." I stopped, remembering Roger's explanation. Most people couldn't see the differences in the extras. Alex couldn't understand the danger he couldn't perceive. Alex cut a generous slice of cake, the knife sinking through the chocolate frosting with ease. "This looks amazing." He placed it on a paper plate and took a plastic fork from the drawer. I reached for my phone, thinking I should call Roger, but the break room door opened again. Roger stood in the doorway, his face going from normal to worried as he saw Alex lifting a forkful of cake to his mouth. "Hayes," Roger started, but it was too late. Alex took a large bite, making an appreciative sound. "God, that's good," he said, taking another bite before Roger could finish speaking. "You guys are missing out." Roger looked at me and shook his head a little, warning me not to get involved. His face had gone pale. "Miller, I need to see you in my office," Roger said, his voice tight. "Hayes, enjoy your cake." Roger turned and walked out. I followed, looking back once at Alex, who gave me a thumbs up as he continued eating, completely unaware of Roger's reaction. In Roger's office, he closed the door and sat heavily in his chair. "I tried to warn him," I said. Roger nodded, rubbing his forehead. "I know. Some people can't be saved from themselves." He looked at me directly. "You did the right thing, not eating it. What's going to happen to Alex?" Roger didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was flat. "Nothing good. Should we call someone? Get him medical help?" "It won't help." Roger glanced at his computer screen, then back at me. "The damage is already done. Go back to work, Miller, and stay away from Hayes for the rest of the day." I wanted to ask more questions, but Roger had already turned to his keyboard, typing with short, sharp keystrokes that made it clear our conversation was over. Throughout the day, I watched Alex from a distance. For the first few hours, he seemed fine, working at his computer and attending a team meeting around noon. By mid-afternoon, though, I noticed him rubbing his stomach occasionally, his face looking sweaty even in the cool office. At 4:30, he left early, walking quickly toward the elevators with his messenger bag pressed against his side. I tried to catch his eye as he passed, but he looked straight ahead, his normally confident walk now hunched and tense. The next morning, I arrived at exactly 7 a.m. as usual. Joseph, the security guard, gave me a sad nod as I badged in, his face more serious than normal. "Everything okay?" I asked. Joseph glanced around, then leaned closer. "Police activity at Lincoln Park this morning. One of your colleagues, I heard." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Don't know the name. Young guy. Lived in those new apartment buildings on Clark." Alex lived on Clark Street. I'd dropped him off once after we'd both stayed late finishing the Henderson project. When I got to the 14th floor, everyone seemed tense. Small groups of employees stood near the kitchen, talking quietly. I saw Sarah by the window looking worried while checking her phone. "Sarah," I approached cautiously. "What happened?" She looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "Alex Hayes. He's dead." Even though Joseph's words had prepared me, hearing it confirmed hit me hard. How? "They found him in his bathroom this morning. His roommate called 911 when he wouldn't respond." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "The paramedics are saying it looked like he'd been throwing up black stuff. It was all over his mouth and in the sink." Black stuff. The cake had been chocolate. I felt sick. When did it happen? Last night sometime. His roommate heard him in the bathroom around midnight, thought he had food poisoning. Sarah put her phone away, her hands shaking slightly. HR sent an email. They're bringing in grief counselors this afternoon. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Alex had been healthy, in his early 30s. Now he was dead, less than 24 hours after eating that cake. The day went by in a blur of whispered talks and shocked faces. Most people thought Alex had died from some sudden illness, maybe a heart problem they didn't know about, or an allergic reaction. No one mentioned the cake. At 5:15 p.m., Roger called me into his office again. This time he closed the blinds before speaking. "You heard about Hayes," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Yeah, Sarah told me." Roger nodded, his expression grim. "I want to be clear about something, Miller. That cake wasn't meant for Hayes." I stared at him, not getting it at first, then with growing horror as I understood what he meant. "It was meant for me?" "Yes. They're targeting you now." Roger leaned forward, his voice low. "Your ability to see the extras, your strict rule following, it's drawn attention." "They? What are you talking about? Who's they?" Roger's look was steady. "Whatever controls this building, the entities that exist here." A chill ran through me as I recalled the thing that had searched the office after hours. The one I encountered when I stayed late? That's one manifestation. There are others. Roger looked tired, the lines in his face deeper than usual. The rules keep them from noticing you, from marking you. The cake was poisoned, I said, my mind racing to process this new information. Not in the way you're thinking. Roger tapped his fingers on his desk, a nervous habit I'd never seen from him before. The food they leave, it creates a connection, a way for them to find you later, to feed. Feed on what? Roger's silence was answer enough. What exactly is happening here? I demanded, anger momentarily overpowering my fear. What is this place? Roger paused, like he was deciding what he should share with me. Finally, he said, Something inhuman lives in this building, has for decades. The rules keep it from noticing you. I thought about all I'd witnessed in my short time at Axis Corp. Brian Reynolds' disappearance after coming in early, the entity that had hunted me after hours, the fake Michael that no one else could identify, and now Alex dead after eating unattended food. The rules aren't arbitrary policy, I said slowly. They're defense mechanisms against predators. Roger nodded once. Now you understand. Why does anyone work here? Why don't people leave? Some do when they can. Others... Roger shrugged. The pay is good. Benefits are excellent. And where would they go? The job market is tight, especially for specialized roles. Most people don't notice anything strange anyway. Their minds can't process it. But you see it, I said. You know what's happening. 20 years in this building, Miller. I've seen things that... He stopped, looking down at his hands. I've lost people. Good people who broke the rules or just got unlucky. I've learned how to survive here. I thought about my near-empty bank account, the student loans, the relief of that first paycheck, the desperation that had made me take this job in the first place. What do I do now? Keep following the rules, all of them. Be even more careful than before. Roger opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small silver device that looked like a key fob. Carry this. It won't stop them, but it might warn you when they're close. The extras hate the high-frequency tone it emits. I grabbed the device. It looked pretty normal, just had one small button on the side. Press it if you see anything unusual. One press turns it on, another turns it off. Roger stood, signaling the end of our conversation. And Miller? Don't tell anyone else what I've told you. Most couldn't handle it, and those who could might do something stupid. I pocketed the device and nodded. Thank you. As I walked back to my desk, I realized what all this meant. Axis Corp wasn't just an office with strange rules. It was a place where something not human was looking for its next target. And that target might be me. I sat at my computer, pretending to work while thinking about everything Roger had told me. The rules weren't random. They were how you stayed alive in a place where dangerous things looked like normal people, left gifts, and took those who weren't careful. Alex had paid the price for his dismissal of those rules. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. I stood in the back row at Alex's funeral, watching his family accept condolences from a stream of Axis Corp employees. His mother held a tissue in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. His father stood next to her, shaking hands without emotion. They looked confused, trying to understand how their healthy 31-year-old son had died so suddenly. The official cause was listed as acute gastrointestinal hemorrhage. The medical examiner found no explanation for why Alex's digestive system had basically dissolved from the inside out. The cake, that normal-looking chocolate cake, had killed him in less than 24 hours. It should have been me. Roger's words kept playing in my head. That cake wasn't meant for Hayes. The entities in the building had marked me, and Alex had paid the price for my ability to see through their disguises. I slipped out before the service ended, unable to look at Alex's photo on the memorial stand any longer. I'd known him for barely a month, but I felt terrible about his death. 3 days later, I sat in my car in the Axis Corp parking garage at 6:58 a.m., watching the seconds tick by on my dashboard clock. 2 minutes until 7 a.m., the earliest we could safely enter the building according to rule number 1. I'd followed the rules religiously since my first day, but now I needed to understand why they worked. The small silver device Roger had given me sat on the passenger seat beside an EMF meter I'd ordered online. If something supernatural lived in this building, it might give off measurable electromagnetic frequencies. It was a shot in the dark, but I needed somewhere to start. At exactly 7 a.m., I grabbed my equipment, tucked it into my laptop bag, and headed into the building. Joseph Martinez nodded from behind the security desk as I badged in. "Morning, Mr. Miller." "Morning, Joseph." I looked at the security monitors behind him. One showed the parking garage, another the main entrance, and several others switched between different hallways and elevator banks. One screen was just static. "Camera issues?" I asked, pointing to the snow-filled screen. Joseph's eyes moved to it and back to me. "Maintenance problem. They're working on it." I nodded and headed to the elevators. Once inside, I looked at the panel of buttons. Floors 1 through 20 were clearly marked, but I'd never paid much attention to which departments were on which floors beyond our 14th floor Data Operations Center. I pressed the button for the 5th floor. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, harder. The button didn't light up like the others. I made a face and selected the 14th floor, and the elevator started going up. When I reached my desk, I pulled up the company directory on my computer. Each department was listed with its floor number, but there was no entry for the 5th floor. I opened the building's evacuation map from the employee website. There it was. Floor 5, clearly marked with exit routes, fire extinguisher locations, and emergency stairwells. A floor that officially existed but couldn't be reached. I began my workday as usual, handling data requests and updating databases. At lunch, I took the stairs down to the 6th floor, then tried to continue down to the 5th. The door to the stairwell between floors 6 and 5 was locked with a keypad. Weird for a fire exit. Back at my desk, I pulled up the security footage archives I could see as part of my data operations job. Most employees couldn't view these files, but Roger had given me database-level permissions to fix some corrupted entries last week. I still had that access. I searched backward through employee badge scans, looking for clues. Brian Reynolds' disappearance, Marcus before him. 3 others I'd found from HR's automated resignation emails. I made a spreadsheet with the dates. The connection showed up right away. 27 days. Each disappearance had happened every 27 days, give or take 1 day. If this kept going, someone else would vanish in exactly 11 days. "Miller." I quickly minimized my spreadsheet as Roger's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him standing at my cubicle entrance with a coffee cup, eyes narrowed. "Roger, what's up?" "Let's talk in my office." I followed him, trying to look casual. Had he somehow seen what I was researching? Did the building itself monitor our activities? Roger closed his office door and waved for me to sit. He took his time getting into his chair, looking at me with an expression I couldn't figure out. "You've been busy this morning," he finally said. "Just catching up on work. Accessing security archives isn't your job. Neither is trying to get to the 5th floor." I tried not to look surprised. "How did you—" "I've worked here for 20 years, Miller. You think I don't know when someone starts pulling threads?" He took a sip of his coffee. "Tell me what you've found." I paused, not sure if this was a test. Roger had warned me to be careful, given me the device to detect extras. But how far did his help go? 27 days, I said. That's the pattern. Every 27 days, someone disappears. Roger's eyebrows rose slightly. Go on. And the 5th floor exists on paper, but not in reality. It's on every evacuation map, but you can't access it from the elevators or stairs. What else? I pulled the EMF meter from my pocket. I wanted to measure electromagnetic fluctuations near the places where people disappeared. see if there's any scientific explanation for what's happening. Roger set his coffee down and leaned back in his chair. For a long moment, he just looked at me as if making a decision. Then he sighed. "This building wasn't always like this," he said quietly. "When I started here, it was normal, boring even. Just another corporate office. What happened? 15 years ago, the executive team brought in a consultant, some new age type who promised to improve workplace energy and productivity." Roger's mouth twisted. They performed a ritual in the executive conference room on the 5th floor. Candles, chanting, the works. Most of the staff thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. No, Roger rubbed his forehead. They opened something they couldn't close. The first disappearance happened that night, the CEO's assistant. 1 minute she was working late, the next she was gone. Personal items still on her desk, car in the garage. Never seen again. I thought about Brian Reynolds' car, sitting abandoned in the garage. And then, things started changing. The 5th floor became inaccessible overnight. Elevators would stop working at specific times. Food left in break rooms would vanish, then reappear, looking identical, but wrong. People started seeing copies of their co-workers. "The extras," I said. "Yes, and people kept disappearing. Always when they broke some pattern we hadn't identified yet." Roger's eyes had a distant look. "It took us years to figure out the rules. Each one was discovered through loss." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Why stay? Why does anyone stay once they realize what's happening?" Roger's look sharpened. "Where would we go? The thing that lives here now. It marks people. Those who learn too much. Who see too much. It doesn't just let them walk away. So the rules protect us, but they're also a cage." "Exactly." He nodded. "The higher-ups know something is wrong, but most can't perceive it clearly. They've convinced themselves it's just bad luck or stress or typical corporate turnover. Their minds can't process what's really happening. But yours can, and mine. Yes, that's rare. Maybe 1 in 50 people can see the extras for what they are." Roger studied me. "Your notice about the 27-day cycle, that's new information. I knew there was a pattern, but I couldn't pin it down exactly. I thought about the implications. So in 11 days, someone else will vanish." Roger nodded. "Unless they're very, very careful." My EMF meter suddenly lit up, its needle swinging into the red zone. At the same moment, Roger's computer monitor flashed, the screen going black for a second before returning to normal. "It's listening," Roger whispered, his eyes darting to the corners of the room. "It always is." The EMF meter went back to normal readings. I put it in my pocket and tried to look calm, even though I felt really cold and scared. "I need to think about all this," I said. Roger nodded. "Be careful, Miller. The rules will protect you, but only if you follow them completely. No exceptions, no tests, no looking for answers." I went back to my desk, my mind racing. For the rest of the day, I went through the motions of my job while processing everything Roger had told me. A ritual that opened something, a 15-year haunting that had claimed countless victims, rules that protected but also imprisoned. I faced a choice. I could leave Axis Corp, knowing I might become a target outside the protective structure of the rules, or I could stay and try to survive in a building with something not human that hunted people. That afternoon, an email arrived from HR. "Internal opportunity, executive assistant position, 5th floor operations." The listed salary was triple what I currently made. The requirements matched my qualifications exactly, as if the position had been made just for me. Bait. That's what it was. The thing was offering me direct access to the 5th floor, the center of whatever had been let loose 15 years ago. It wanted me there for some reason. I closed the email without responding and pulled up my spreadsheet again. Over the past weeks, I'd been writing down every strange thing I'd seen or heard about. The thing that hunted after 8 p.m. The extras that showed up sometimes. The food that caused Alex's death. I started seeing patterns. The after-hours hunter never showed up on days when it rained. The extras couldn't copy unique physical features perfectly. The food left as bait was always sweet, never savory. At 7:25 p.m., I packed up my things, making sure to leave before the 8 p.m. deadline. Instead of heading to the parking garage, I went to Roger's office. He was still there, looking at reports with his desk lamp on, the overhead lights already off. He looked up as I came in. "Miller? What is it?" "I got the job offer for the 5th floor," I said, closing his door behind me. "Triple my current salary." Roger's face tightened. "Don't even think about it." "I'm not." I sat down across from him. "But I have a different proposal." "I'm listening." "I've documented patterns in the entity's behavior. I think there's a weakness we can exploit." I placed my notebook on his desk. "Its activity fluctuates with weather conditions. It can't manifest certain forms on rainy days. The extras can't perfectly replicate unique physical features." Roger opened the notebook, looking at my detailed notes and diagrams. For the first time since I'd met him, he smiled. "I've been waiting for someone to ask that," he said quietly. "Someone who can see what I see, who thinks like I do." "Ask what?" His eyes met mine, a spark of hope in them I'd never seen before. "If there's a way to fight back, to end this, is there?" "I don't know," Roger admitted, "but in 20 years I've collected my own observations." He unlocked his bottom desk drawer and pulled out a thick binder. "Maybe together we can find the answer." As the office emptied around us, we stayed in Roger's office, comparing notes under the light of his desk lamp. For the first time since starting at Axis Corp, I felt something beyond fear or confusion. I felt purpose. Whatever haunted this building had ruled unchallenged for 15 years, but perhaps that was about to change. I pulled into the Boundary Waters Ranger Station at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning in February when the thermometer read -20. My breath fogged the windshield before I could turn off the engine. The cold hit me like a wall when I opened the door. The station looked like every other ranger outpost I'd seen. Low brown building, metal roof, flagpole out front. A few trucks parked in the gravel lot, snow packed hard around the tires. Nothing special about it. Just another job in another place where I didn't know anybody. I grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat and headed for the front door. My boots crunched on the snow. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. I'd worked winters before, but this was something else. This was the kind of cold that could kill you if you weren't careful. The door opened before I could knock. A man stood there, maybe 55, built solid and wearing the standard ranger uniform. Gray hair under his regulation hat. Blue eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. "You Collins?" he said. "Yeah, Don Collins. David Lawrence, station chief." He stepped aside to let me in. "You're right on time." The inside was warm, thank God. Standard government office setup. Desks, filing cabinets, maps on the walls. Coffee maker in the corner that looked like it had been there since the 80s. 2 other rangers sat at desks, doing paperwork. They looked up when I came in, nodded, went back to their work. "Coffee," Lawrence said. "Please." He poured me a cup from the pot. Black, no cream or sugar offered. I took it and wrapped my hands around the mug. The heat felt good. "Long drive?" he said. "Not too bad. Left Minneapolis around 5. "Well, you made it, that's what matters." He walked over to his desk and picked up a manila folder. "Before we get into the standard orientation stuff, there's something you need to know about this station." I sipped the coffee. It was terrible, but it was hot. "Okay." Lawrence opened the folder and pulled out a laminated card, about the size of an index card, white background with black text. He handed it to me. "Read this," he said. "Read it carefully." I looked down at the card. 4 lines of text, numbered 1 through 4. 1. Always use grabber tools when picking up trash. Never touch found items with bare hands. 2. Carry a compass at all times. If it starts spinning wildly, run back to base immediately. 3. If you hear children laughing in the woods when no children are present, shoot yourself in the foot and radio for immediate extraction. 4. Never leave the base between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. for any reason. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Lawrence. "Is this some kind of joke?" I said. His face didn't change. "Do I look like I'm joking?" "Well, no, but..." I looked at the card again. "Shoot myself in the foot? Come on. You think I'm hazing the new guy." "Aren't you?" Lawrence walked over to the far wall. I hadn't noticed it before, but it was covered with photographs. Headshots, like employee photos, all in uniform, all Rangers. "Come here," he said. I walked over, still holding the card and the coffee. The photos were arranged in 3 rows, 12 total. Men and women, different ages, all smiling in that forced way people smile for official pictures. "These are Rangers who've worked at this station over the past 5 years, Lawrence said. He pointed to the photos one by one. Sarah Chen, Marcus Webb, Jennifer Rodriguez, Clay Lucas, Brian Romero, Dean Casey. He went through all 12 names. I didn't recognize any of them, but that wasn't unusual. Rangers moved around a lot. "Where are they now?" I said. "Gone." "Transferred?" "Missing." I looked at him. "Missing?" "Vanished. Disappeared. Pick your word." He pointed to a photo in the top row. Young guy, maybe late 20s, brown hair, clean shaven. "Clay Lucas. Been here 2 years, good Ranger, knew the woods better than most. Last spring he was doing a routine patrol on the North Trail. Found a wallet on the ground." Lawrence paused. I waited. "Picked it up with his bare hands," he said. "Broke rule number 1. And?" "We found his boots the next morning, standing upright in the snow about 2 miles from where he'd radioed in. Empty boots. No body. No footprints leading away. No sign of struggle. Nothing." I stared at the photo. The guy looked normal. Happy even. Like someone you'd have a beer with after work. "That's impossible," I said. "Is it?" Lawrence pointed to another photo. Woman, maybe 35, red hair. "Jennifer Rodriguez, 3 months ago. Heard children laughing while she was checking the equipment shed. Thought it was kids from the nearby campground. Went to investigate instead of following the rules. What happened? Found her radio 2 days later. Still clipped to her belt. Belt was still buckled. No body, no trace. My coffee was getting cold. I took a sip anyway, just to have something to do with my hands. "You're serious about this," I said. "Dead serious." Lawrence looked at the wall of photos. 12 Rangers in 5 years. All good people. All experienced. All broke one of those rules. I looked at the card again. The laminated surface was worn, like it had been handled a lot. The text was clear, printed in a simple font. Nothing fancy about it. "Why these rules?" I said. "I mean, who came up with them?" "Trial and error, mostly error." Lawrence walked back to his desk and sat down. "When I took over this station 6 years ago, Rangers were disappearing and nobody knew why. We started keeping track, looking for patterns. These 4 rules are what we figured out. And they work. Rangers who follow them stay alive. Rangers who don't..." He gestured at the wall. I read the card a 3rd time. The rules seemed insane, but Lawrence wasn't acting like a man who was pulling a prank. The other Rangers in the office weren't laughing or smirking. They were doing their paperwork like this was just another Tuesday morning. "The compass thing," I said. "What makes it spin?" "Don't know. Don't want to find out." "And the laughing?" Same answer. I looked at rule number 4. "What happens between 1 and 4 a.m.? "Nothing good." Lawrence opened another folder on his desk. Look, Collins, I know how this sounds. I know what you're thinking, but I've been doing this job for 28 years, and I've never seen anything like what happens in these woods. What exactly happens? Things that don't make sense. Things that shouldn't be possible. He pulled out a form and set it on the desk. You can transfer out, right now. No questions asked, no mark on your record. I'll make some calls, get you stationed somewhere else by the end of the week. I looked at the photos on the wall again. 12 people, all gone, all because they broke one of 4 simple rules. Or, I said, or you stay. You follow those rules exactly. No exceptions, no improvisation, no thinking you know better. You do that, you'll probably be fine. Probably. Nothing's guaranteed, but those rules are the best protection we've got. I finished my coffee. It was definitely terrible, but I was starting to think terrible coffee was the least of my problems here. The foot thing, I said. Why does that work? Don't know, but it does. Pain seems to break whatever hold the laughter has. Rangers who've done it get extracted safely. Rangers who don't. He shrugged. How many have actually shot themselves? 3. All survived. All went back to normal duty after they healed up. I thought about that. 3 people had been so convinced by the sound of children laughing that they'd put a bullet in their own foot rather than investigate. That said something about how serious this was. What about backup? I said. Partner system? We use partners when we can, but sometimes you're alone out there. That's when the rules matter most. Lawrence stood up and walked over to a map on the wall. The Boundary Waters area, marked with trails and landmarks. Red X's marked in various spots. These are where we've lost people, he said. No real pattern we can see. Happens all over the territory. I counted the X's. 12 of them, scattered across maybe 100 square miles of wilderness. Any theories? I said. Plenty of theories. No answers. He turned back to me. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. This is dangerous work. More dangerous than normal ranger duty. But it's important work. These woods need protection, and people need protection from these woods. What do you mean? Hikers, campers, hunters. They come through here all the time. Most of them are fine, but some... He pointed to a different section of the map. We get missing person reports. People who came out here and never came back. We find some of them eventually. Others we don't. I studied the map. Hundreds of miles of forest, lakes, rivers. Easy place to get lost. Easy place to disappear. The rules apply to civilians too, I said. We don't know. The rules came from watching what happened to rangers. Could be civilians are safe. Could be they're not. We try to keep people away from the areas where we've had problems. How? Trail closures, equipment failures, creative permit delays. Lawrence sat back down. We do what we can without causing a panic. I looked at the laminated card one more time. 4 rules. 4 ways to stay alive in a job that was apparently trying to kill me. What's the pay like? I said. Lawrence almost smiled. Same as any other ranger station, government scale. Benefits? Standard, plus hazard pay, though we don't call it that officially. I thought about my options. I could transfer out like he'd offered. Find a nice safe station somewhere in Colorado or Wyoming. Count deer and give directions to tourists. Or I could stay here and follow 4 insane rules while trying not to disappear like 12 other people. I'll stay, I said. You sure? No, but I'll stay anyway. Lawrence nodded. Good. First thing you need to do is memorize those rules, word for word. Then we'll get you equipped and show you the territory. What kind of equipment? Standard gear, plus a few extras. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a compass. Military-style, solid construction. This doesn't leave your person, ever. Shower with it if you have to. I took the compass. It felt heavier than it looked. "What about the grabber tools? We've got plenty. Different lengths, different styles. You'll find what works for you." He handed me another form. "Emergency contact information. Make sure it's current." I filled out the form. My sister in Milwaukee, my parents in Ohio, people who'd want to know if I ended up as another photo on the wall. "One more thing," Lawrence said. He opened another drawer and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a single bullet. ".22 caliber for your backup weapon. I don't carry a .22. You do now." He handed me another form. "Requisition for a backup sidearm. Light, easy to handle, perfect for close-range work." I looked at the bullet. Small, simple, designed for one very specific purpose. "Any particular spot?" I said. "Footwork's best. Avoid the arch. Too many important things there. Toe is good, or the outer edge. Quick, clean, effective." I put the bullet in my pocket. Never thought I'd be carrying ammunition specifically for shooting myself, but apparently this job was full of surprises. "When do I start?" I said. "Today. We'll do a short patrol this afternoon, get you familiar with the area. Nothing too far out." Lawrence stood up. "But first, let me introduce you to the rest of the team." He walked me over to the other rangers. Both looked up from their paperwork. "Karen Marquez," he said, pointing to a woman, maybe 40 years old, dark hair pulled back, serious expression. "Been here 3 years. Knows the rules better than anyone." Karen nodded at me. "Welcome to the station," she said. "Hope you last longer than the others." "Thanks, I think." The other ranger was younger, maybe 25, blonde hair and nervous eyes. "Ava Graves," Lawrence said. "Started last month, still learning the ropes." "Hey," Ava said. She looked at the card in my hand. "Those rules saved my life last week." "What happened?" "Compass started spinning during a routine patrol. Spun so fast I thought it was broken, but I remembered the rule and ran back here as fast as I could." "See anything?" "No, that's what scared me." Lawrence walked back to his desk. "That's the thing about this place. Most of the time you don't see anything. You just follow the rules and stay safe. It's when you start thinking the rules don't matter that things go wrong." I looked at the photos on the wall one more time. 12 faces, 12 names, 12 people who thought they knew better. I wasn't going to be number 13. The first week went by without anything happening. Lawrence paired me with Brian Romero, who'd been at the station for 8 years and knew every trail in our sector. Brian was about 45, maybe 6'1", with salt and pepper hair and gray eyes that never seemed to miss anything. He had this permanent 5 o'clock shadow and a small scar above his left eyebrow that he said came from a tree branch back in his early days. "Stick close and watch what I do," he told me that first morning as we loaded our packs. "Lawrence probably gave you the speech about the rules, but seeing how it works out here is different." We headed out on snowshoes, following a trail that wound through dense pine forest toward Echo Lake. The temperature was around 0, which Brian said was practically balmy for February. Our breath came out in white puffs that froze on our face masks within minutes. "How long have you been following the rules?" I asked as we trudged through snow that came up past our knees in some spots. "Since my second year here. Before that, I thought they were bullshit." Brian stepped over a fallen log and waited for me to catch up. "Lost 3 partners in 6 months. Started paying attention after that." He pulled out his grabber tool when we came across a beer can half buried in the snow near the trail. The tool was basically a long metal stick with mechanical fingers on the end that could open and close. Brian positioned it carefully, gripped the can, and dropped it into his trash bag without ever getting within arm's reach of it. "You really think touching that can would have been dangerous?" I said. "Don't know. Don't want to find out." Brian collapsed the tool and clipped it back to his belt. Lucas thought the same thing you're thinking right now. Found his boots the next morning, standing in the snow like he just stepped right out of them. We covered about 5 miles that day, checking trail markers and clearing small branches that had fallen across the path. Brian showed me how to use the radio to check in with base every hour, how to read the trail maps, and how to spot signs that civilians had been in areas where they weren't supposed to be. Most of our job is just being visible, he said as we stopped for lunch near a frozen stream. People see rangers out here. They're less likely to wander off into places they shouldn't go. What kind of places? Brian unwrapped a sandwich and looked around at the trees. Hard to say. Changes depending on the day, the weather, who knows what else. That's why we stick to marked trails and follow the rules. The second day, we found a wallet sitting on a tree stump about 3 miles from base. It was brown leather, looked expensive, and hadn't been there long because there wasn't any snow on it. Someone probably dropped this recently, I said, reaching for it. Brian grabbed my wrist. Rule 1. I stopped. He was right. Always use grabber tools. Never touch found items with bare hands. I watched as Brian carefully picked up the wallet with his tool and dropped it into an evidence bag. We'll turn this into Lawrence. He'll figure out how to get it back to whoever lost it. Seems like overkill for a wallet. Lucas thought the same thing about a wallet. Brian sealed the evidence bag and put it in his pack. You want to end up like him? I didn't answer that. We finished the patrol and headed back to base. By the third day, I was getting used to the routine. Check compass every few minutes. Use the grabber tool for everything. Even obvious trash like candy wrappers and cigarette butts. Stay on marked trails. Radio in every hour on the hour. Brian never seemed to relax, even when we were just walking between checkpoints. His hand stayed near his compass, and he'd stop every so often to listen to the woods around us. You hear that? He'd say. I'd listen. Usually it was just wind in the trees or a bird somewhere in the distance. No kids laughing, he'd say after a minute. Good. On the fourth day, we ran into a group of cross-country skiers who'd taken a wrong turn and ended up about 2 miles off the main trail. Brian was polite but firm about getting them back where they belonged. Trail you want is back that way, he told them, pointing south. Follow your tracks back to where you came from. Then look for the blue markers. We were hoping to explore a bit. One of them said, The map shows some interesting terrain up ahead. Trails closed past this point. Safety reasons. The skier looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Brian's voice made him think better of it. They turned around and headed back the way they'd come. Happens a lot, Brian said as we watched them disappear through the trees. People think they know better than the trail markers. What would have happened if they'd kept going? Maybe nothing. Maybe we'd be looking for their gear tomorrow morning. By the end of the week, I was starting to understand why Brian carried himself the way he did. The woods felt different here than any place I'd worked before. Not dangerous exactly, but unpredictable, like something was always watching from just outside your vision. You're getting it, Brian said on Friday afternoon as we finished our patrol. Took me a lot longer to figure out that feeling you're having right now. What feeling? Like the trees have eyes. He was right. I'd been feeling that way since the second day, but I hadn't wanted to admit it. The weekend passed without incident. I spent Saturday in town, getting groceries and trying to process everything I'd learned during my first week. Sunday, I stayed at the cabin Lawrence had arranged for me, reading through training manuals and studying trail maps. Monday morning, Brian and I headed out toward Moose Lake. It was my 10th day on the job, and I was starting to feel confident about the routine. Check compass, use grabber tool, stay on trail, radio in every hour. The temperature had dropped overnight, down to around -10. Our snowshoes crunched through fresh powder that had fallen during the night, maybe 3 or 4 inches worth. Good tracking weather, Brian said as we followed the trail north. Snow's soft enough to show footprints, but not so deep we can't move. We'd been walking for about an hour when Brian suddenly stopped. I nearly ran into him. What's wrong? Brian was staring down at his compass. I pulled out mine and looked at it. The needle was spinning, not just moving around a little bit, but spinning in complete circles like it couldn't figure out which way was north. "Shit," Brian said. His voice was barely a whisper. My compass kept spinning. Faster now. The needle was just a blur of red and white. "Run," Brian said. I looked at him. "What?" "Run back to base, now." The compass was spinning so fast I couldn't even see the needle anymore. Just a smear of color behind the glass. "Run!" Brian screamed. I ran. Didn't think about it, didn't ask questions, just turned around and started running back toward the station as fast as I could move on snowshoes. Branches whipped across my face and caught at my jacket. I could hear Brian shouting something behind me, but I couldn't make out the words. I kept running. My lungs burned from the cold air, and my legs felt like they were on fire, but I didn't slow down. The compass in my hand kept spinning even as I ran. After what felt like forever, I saw the station through the trees. I stumbled into the parking lot and nearly fell as I tried to stop. Lawrence came out of the building before I could reach the door. "Where's Brian?" he said. I bent over, trying to catch my breath. Compass started spinning. He told me to run. Lawrence grabbed his radio. "Karen, Ava, we've got a situation. Grab emergency packs and meet me at the trucks." I looked back toward the trail. Couldn't see anything through the trees. No sign of Brian anywhere. "How long ago?" Lawrence said. "Maybe 10 minutes. We were about an hour out, near the Moose Lake Trail junction." Karen and Ava came out of the station carrying heavy packs and medical gear. Nobody said anything as we loaded into 2 trucks and drove to the trailhead closest to where I'd left Brian. The search took 3 hours. We followed my snowshoe tracks back to where Brian and I had stopped. Found his tracks too, clear as anything in the fresh snow. But they just ended. "Here!" Ava called out. We gathered around where she was standing. Brian's boots were sitting in the snow, perfectly upright, laces still tied. But no Brian. No footprints leading away from the boots. No signs of a struggle. Nothing. Lawrence knelt down next to the boots and looked around at the snow. "Any other tracks?" We searched in expanding circles for another hour. Didn't find anything. No blood, no torn clothing, no indication of what had happened. Just empty boots standing in the snow like Brian had stepped right out of them and vanished. That night, back at the station, Lawrence poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. "You did the right thing," he said. "Brian knew the rules. When your compass starts spinning, you run. No exceptions." "What happened to him?" "Same thing that happened to the others." Lawrence gestured toward the wall of photos. "The compass rule exists for a reason. Whatever's out there, it doesn't like being found." I looked at the photos again. 13 faces now, counting Brian. 13 people who'd followed the rules right up until the moment they couldn't. 3 weeks went by without any problems. Karen paired me with different rangers each day while they figured out what to do about Brian. Nobody talked about him much. His desk sat empty, coffee mug still in the same spot. I got used to the routine. Check compass every few minutes. Use the grabber tool for everything. Stay on marked trails. Radio in every hour. The rules became automatic, like checking your mirrors while driving. Tuesday morning, Lawrence assigned me to Eagle's Nest Trail, solo patrol this time. "You ready for that?" he asked, looking up from his paperwork. "Yeah, I think so." "It's a short loop, 3 miles total. Should take you about 2 hours." He marked the trail on my map with a red pen. "Standard patrol. Check the markers, clear any debris, keep an eye out for civilians who wandered off the main trails." I grabbed my pack and headed out around 9. The temperature hit about 15 degrees, which felt warm compared to the -20 we'd been getting. Fresh snow from the night before covered everything in a clean white layer about 2 inches deep. The Eagle's Nest Trail started a quarter-mile north of the station. I followed the blue markers through dense pine forest, checking my compass every few minutes. The needle pointed steadily north, no spinning. The trail wound uphill through thick trees. I stopped every 20 minutes to listen for sounds and look around. Nothing unusual, just wind in the branches and snow falling from pine boughs. At the 1 hour mark, I radioed back to base. Base, this is Collins. Eagle's Nest Patrol, 1 hour in. All clear. Copy that, Collins. Ava's voice came through the radio. How's the trail condition? Good. Light snow overnight, but the path's clear. No debris. Roger. Check in at the 2-hour mark. I kept walking. The trail curved east toward a small clearing where the old Eagle's Nest observation post used to stand. Lawrence had mentioned it during my first week. They'd torn down the wooden platform years ago, but hikers still came looking for it. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Clear as anything, high-pitched, musical, children laughing. I stopped walking. My blood went cold. The sound came from somewhere ahead of me, maybe 50 yards through the trees. Light, joyful laughter, the kind you hear on playgrounds during recess. But there weren't any children out here. There couldn't be. Not in this weather, not on these trails. The laughter came again, closer this time. Still ahead of me, but moving. I remembered Rule 3 word for word. If you hear children laughing in the woods when no children are present, shoot yourself in the foot and radio for immediate extraction. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my compass. The needle pointed north, steady as always. No spinning. The laughter echoed through the trees again, definitely closer. It sounded like 3 or 4 kids, maybe 5 or 6 years old, playing some kind of game. I reached for my radio, then stopped. What was I going to say? That I heard kids laughing? They'd tell me to investigate, find the children, make sure they were safe. But I knew there weren't any children out there. The laughter moved again. This time it came from my right, about 30 yards away. Still musical, still innocent. One of them giggled, high and sweet. My heart hammered against my ribs. I unholstered my service weapon with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The metal felt cold even through my gloves. The laughter circled around me now, first from the right, then behind me, then to my left. Like they were playing Ring Around the Rosie in the forest and I was standing in the middle. I thought about Brian, about his boots standing empty in the snow. I thought about the photos on Lawrence's wall, 13 faces now. I thought about Jennifer Rodriguez, who'd investigated children's laughter and disappeared. They'd found her radio 2 days later, still clipped to her belt. The laughter came again, directly in front of me. So close I should have been able to see them through the trees. But I didn't see anything, just pine branches and snow. I aimed the gun at my left foot. Lawrence had said to avoid the arch, go for the toe or the outer edge. Less chance of permanent damage. The laughter grew louder. More children now, maybe 6 or 7 of them. They sounded happy, carefree, like they were having the best day of their lives. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked through the forest like thunder. Pain exploded through my boot, white-hot and immediate. I screamed and collapsed into the snow, blood seeping through the leather. The laughter stopped. Complete silence. Not even wind in the trees. I lay there gasping, snow soaking through my jacket. My foot felt like someone had hit it with a sledgehammer. Blood spread across the white ground in a dark red stain. I fumbled for my radio with numb fingers. Base, this is Collins. Emergency extraction needed. I'm down. Static, then Ava's voice, sharp with concern. Collins, what's your status? I followed Rule 3. Shot myself in the foot. Need immediate extraction. Silence on the radio for about 5 seconds. Copy that, Collins. We're coming. Stay on the radio with me. What's your exact location? Eagle's Nest Trail, maybe 1.5 miles in, just before the clearing where the old observation post was. Roger, Lawrence and Karen are heading out now. How bad is the bleeding? I looked down at my boot. Blood kept seeping through the leather, but it wasn't gushing. Steady bleeding, but not arterial. I can put pressure on it. Do that. Stay awake. Stay talking to me. I pressed my gloved hands against the wound. The pain made me dizzy, but I stayed conscious. The forest remained completely silent. No laughter, No wind. Nothing. Collins, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Good. They're about 10 minutes out. I kept pressure on the wound and watched the tree line. Nothing moved. Whatever had been making that laughter was gone now. Lawrence and Karen found me 20 minutes later. They helped me to my feet and got me back to the parking lot where an ambulance was waiting. The EMTs loaded me into the back and we headed south toward Duluth. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and floor wax. They wheeled me into an emergency room where a doctor with blonde hair and wire-rimmed glasses was waiting. "I'm Dr. Patterson," she said, pulling on latex gloves. "Let's see what we're dealing with here." She cut away my boot and sock. The bullet had gone through the outer edge of my left foot, missing all the major bones. Clean entry and exit wounds. "You're lucky," she said, cleaning the wounds. "Missed everything important. How exactly did this happen?" I looked at her. She had green eyes and a professional expression that said she'd seen everything. "Accidental discharge while cleaning my weapon." She paused in her work and looked at me. "While you were cleaning your weapon, on patrol, in the middle of the forest." "That's right." She went back to cleaning the wound. "Mr. Collins, I've been practicing emergency medicine for 15 years. I've seen accidental discharges. This isn't one." I didn't say anything. "The angle of entry suggests you aimed deliberately at your own foot and pulled the trigger." She started applying antiseptic. "That's not an accident. That's intentional self-harm." "I'm not suicidal, if that's what you're thinking. Then why did you shoot yourself in the foot?" Before I could answer, Lawrence walked into the room. He nodded at Dr. Patterson, then looked at me. "How's he doing, Doc?" "He'll be fine. Clean wounds, no bone damage. He'll be on crutches for a few weeks." She finished bandaging my foot. "But I have some concerns about the circumstances." Lawrence pulled up a chair next to my bed. "Doc, can you give us a minute?" She looked between us, then shrugged. "I'll be back to check on you in an hour, Mr. Collins. Try not to shoot yourself again." After she left, Lawrence leaned forward. "Tell me what happened." "I heard children laughing, just like the rule says. I followed protocol." "How many voices?" "Started with 3 or 4. By the end, maybe 6 or 7. "How close?" "Close. Real close. They were circling me through the trees." Lawrence nodded. "You did the right thing. The rule saved your life." "What about the trail? Is it clear now?" "That's what we need to find out." Lawrence stood up. "Karen's doing a sweep of the area now. We'll know more in a few hours." Dr. Patterson came back with discharge papers and a prescription for pain medication. She gave me a pair of crutches and instructions for caring for the wounds. "Keep the bandages dry for 48 hours, she said. "Come back if you see any signs of infection, redness, swelling, fever." "Thanks, Doc." She looked at me again with those green eyes. "Mr. Collins, if you're having thoughts of self-harm, there are people who can help." "I'm not." "Then why did you shoot yourself?" Lawrence stepped forward. "Doc, it's complicated. Government business. Government business doesn't usually involve rangers shooting themselves in the foot. This isn't usual government business." She shook her head and handed me the discharge papers. "You're free to go. Take care of yourself." Lawrence drove me back to the station in his truck. We didn't talk much during the 40-minute drive. I kept thinking about the laughter, how innocent it had sounded. When we got back, Karen was waiting in the parking lot. Her face was pale. "What did you find?" Lawrence asked. "You need to see this." We followed her into the station. She led us to the back room where they kept evidence and supplies. On the metal table was a body bag. "Found him about 200 yards from where Collins shot himself," Karen said. "Hayden Gardner." I remembered Gardner. He'd been at the station for about 6 months, worked mostly the northern trails. Quiet guy, kept to himself. "When?" Lawrence asked. "Best guess, sometime yesterday. Maybe early this morning." Lawrence unzipped the bag. Gardner's face was frozen in a smile. Not a normal smile. His mouth was stretched impossibly wide, like someone had carved it that way. His eyes were rolled back, showing nothing but white. "Jesus," I whispered. "Gets worse," Karen said. "Look at his hands." Gardner's hands were pressed against his ears, fingers digging into the skin hard enough to draw blood. Lawrence zipped the bag back up. He heard it too. The laughter. Has to be, but he didn't follow the rule. I looked at the body bag, then at Lawrence. What happens to people who don't follow the rule? You just saw it. Dr. Patterson's words came back to me. Why did you shoot yourself in the foot? Now I knew the answer, because if I hadn't, I'd be in that body bag instead of Gardner. I came back to work 6 weeks later with a limp that wasn't going away anytime soon. Dr. Patterson said it might be permanent, but I could handle the job. The foot ached in cold weather, and I had to favor it when walking on uneven ground. But I was alive, which was more than I could say for Gardner. Lawrence met me at the station door on my first morning back. "How's the foot?" "Hurts some. I can do the work." "Good. We've got a new guy starting today." I followed him inside. The coffee smelled the same, and Karen was at her desk doing paperwork. Ava looked up from her computer and nodded at me. "Welcome back, Don." "Thanks." The new guy sat at Brian's old desk, young, maybe 24, with blonde hair and brown eyes, clean-shaven, eager look on his face. He stood up when Lawrence walked over. "Don Collins, meet Dean Casey, fresh out of the academy." Casey stuck out his hand. "Heard a lot about you. Glad you're back." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, confident. Too confident, maybe. Lawrence handed Casey the same laminated card I'd gotten on my first day. "Read these rules, memorize them, follow them exactly." Casey glanced at the card, then looked at the wall of photos. 14 now, with Gardner's picture added to the bottom row. "Is this some kind of hazing thing?" "No," I said. "It's not." Lawrence's expression didn't change. "Those rules will keep you alive. Every person on that wall broke one of them. Come on. You're serious?" "Dead serious," Karen said from her desk. "Ask Don about Rule 3. Casey looked at me. I pulled up my pant leg and showed him the scar where the bullet went through my foot. "You shot yourself?" "Because I heard children laughing in the woods when no children were there. If I hadn't, I'd be dead." Casey stared at the scar, then at the photos on the wall. "This is crazy." "Crazy or not, it works," Lawrence said. "Follow the rules, you go home. Break them, you end up on the wall." I spent the morning showing Casey around the station. Equipment room, radio procedures, how to fill out patrol reports. He asked good questions about trail maps and emergency protocols. But every time I mentioned the rules, he got that look. The same look I probably had on my first day. "You really believe this stuff?" he asked while we checked radio batteries. "I've seen what happens when people don't follow them. But kids laughing? Come on. I heard them. Multiple voices moving around me in a circle. No kids anywhere in sight." Casey shook his head. "There's got to be a logical explanation. Maybe. But the rule saved my life." We paired up for an afternoon patrol, just a short loop to get Casey familiar with the area. The temperature was around 20 degrees, snow crunching under our boots. I moved slower than usual because of the foot, but Casey didn't seem to mind. "How long you been here?" he asked. "About 3 months. Lost my first partner after 2 weeks." "Lost how?" Compass started spinning. We ran back to base like we're supposed to. I made it. He didn't. Casey was quiet for a while. We checked trail markers, cleared some fallen branches, standard patrol stuff. But I could see him thinking, probably trying to figure out what really happened to all those people. "Must be some kind of gas leak," he said eventually. "Methane or something. Makes people hallucinate." "Could be." Or maybe it's psychological. Group hysteria, shared delusion. Maybe. But I knew it wasn't gas or psychology. I'd heard those children laughing, clear as anything. And Gardner's face in that body bag wasn't the result of hallucinations. We got back to the station around 4. Lawrence was at his desk, going through paperwork. "Howdy do?" Lawrence asked. "Fine, knows the basics." Casey sat down at his desk and pulled out the rule card. He read it again, lips moving slightly. "I've got a question about Rule 4, he said. Lawrence looked up. "What about it?" "Never leave the base between 1 and 4 a.m. What if there's an emergency?" "There won't be. But what if someone calls in a missing person? Or we get a distress signal?" "We handle it after 4 a.m. Casey frowned. "That doesn't make sense. If someone's in trouble, they'll still be in trouble at 4 a.m., Lawrence said. "But you'll be alive to help them." "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You just need to follow the rule." I could see Casey wasn't satisfied with that answer. He had that look again, like he was working on a problem that didn't add up. The next few days went smoothly. Casey learned the patrol routes, got comfortable with the radio procedures. He used the grabber tool without complaining, checked his compass regularly. But I caught him staring at the wall of photos sometimes like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Friday afternoon, Lawrence called a staff meeting. "I'll be in Duluth this weekend," he said. "Meeting with the district supervisor. Don, you're in charge." "Got it." Normal weekend protocols. Day patrols only. Nobody goes out after dark. Casey raised his hand. "What about overnight duty? Who's monitoring the radio?" "The radio goes to voicemail after 6 p.m. We check messages Monday morning." "That seems irresponsible." Lawrence stared at him. "Irresponsible is getting Rangers killed. We don't work nights. Period." "But what if..." "There are no what-ifs. We don't work nights." After Lawrence left, Casey came over to my desk. "This is nuts," he said. "What if someone really needs help? Then they'll need help until morning." "I can't accept that." "You don't have a choice." But I could see he was still thinking about it, still trying to logic his way around the rules. Saturday passed without incident. Karen and I did a morning patrol, found some litter near the parking area, used the grabber tool, bagged everything up. Standard routine. Casey seemed restless. He kept checking the radio, reading through emergency procedures. Around 5 p.m., he asked if I wanted to grab dinner in town. "Can't. I'm staying here tonight." "Why?" "Someone needs to be at the station. Lawrence's rules. But we're not allowed to leave the base between 1 and 4 anyway. So someone's always here during those hours." "That's right." "I could take overnight duty, I don't mind." "No." "Why not? I know the protocols." "Because Lawrence said no night work, and because you're new." Casey looked frustrated, but he didn't argue anymore. He left for town around 6, said he'd be back Sunday morning. I settled in for a quiet night, made some coffee, caught up on paperwork. The station felt different with just me there. Quieter. The heating system made its usual noises, but every sound seemed louder. Around 11 p.m., I checked all the doors and windows. Everything locked tight. I'd done this before when Lawrence was away. Nothing ever happened, but I stayed alert anyway. I dozed in my chair around midnight. Light sleep, the kind where you're still aware of your surroundings. The coffee maker gurgled. Wind rattled the windows. Normal sounds. At 2:30 a.m., I woke up completely. The station was dead silent. Not just quiet. Silent. No heating system noise, no wind, no settling sounds, like someone had turned off all the sound in the world. I sat up and listened. Nothing. Then I noticed Casey's bunk was empty. I walked over to check. Blankets thrown back, pillow still warm. The front door was hanging open, cold air pouring in. I grabbed my flashlight and coat, stepped outside into the parking lot. "Casey?" My voice seemed to disappear into the air. No echo, no response. I swept the flashlight beam across the snow. Fresh footprints led from the front door toward the tree line. Boot prints, Casey's size. I followed the tracks about 50 feet from the building. They stopped at a clear patch of snow between two pine trees. Casey's boots were standing upright in the snow, laces still tied, exactly like Brian's had been, like all the others. But Casey was gone. I aimed my flashlight down at the boots. The beam created a perfect circle of light around them. No other footprints leading away. No signs of struggle. Just empty boots standing in the snow like Casey had vanished right out of them. I backed away slowly, keeping the light on the boots. My breath came out in white puffs, the only movement in the completely still air. Then I heard my radio crackle. Lawrence's voice, scratchy through the static. "Don, you there?" I keyed the mic with shaking hands. "I'm here. Everything okay?" I looked at the boots again. "Casey's gone." "What do you mean gone?" "He left the base around 2:30, found his boots in the snow. No sign of him." Long pause. Then Lawrence's voice, grim and tired. "I'm on my way." Lawrence arrived an hour later with that same expression he'd had when we found Brian's boots. We stood in the parking lot looking at Casey's footprints in the snow. "He volunteered for overnight duty," I said. I told him no, but he stayed anyway. "Must have. Came back after I went to sleep." Lawrence nodded. They always think they know better. Always think the rules don't apply to them. We followed the tracks to where they ended. Casey's boots still stood in the same spot, surrounded by my flashlight beam from earlier. "Same as the others?" I asked. "Exactly the same." Lawrence pulled out his radio and called Karen and Ava, told them to bring search gear, but I could tell from his voice he didn't expect to find anything. We spent 3 hours combing the area around the boots, expanding circles, grid search, the whole procedure. Found nothing. No trace of Casey except the empty boots and the tracks leading to them. On the drive back to the station, Lawrence was quiet. Finally, he spoke. "How many times did you tell him about the rules?" "Every day," explained what happened to the others. But he didn't listen. He thought there had to be logical explanations. Gas leaks, psychology, something. Lawrence shook his head. "There's only one explanation that matters. Follow the rules, you live. Break them, you don't." We got back to the station around 6 a.m. Karen and Ava were already there, coffee made, incident reports ready to fill out. "Any sign of him?" Karen asked. "Just the boots," Lawrence said. Ava looked at Casey's desk, still covered with training manuals and emergency procedures. "He seemed like a good kid." "He was," I said. "Just too smart for his own good." Lawrence sat down heavily in his chair. They always are. Think they can figure it out, find the loophole, beat the system. And they can't. 15 people have tried. 15 people are gone. I thought about Casey, probably lying awake in town, planning his midnight visit to the station, wanting to prove the rules were nonsense, that nothing bad would happen. "What do we tell his family?" I asked. "Same thing we always tell them. He disappeared during a routine patrol. We searched extensively. No trace found." "That's it?" "That's it." Lawrence pulled out a file folder and started filling out paperwork. Another missing person report. Another empty desk. Another photo for the wall. Casey had lasted 5 days. Spring came early that year. Snow melted by mid-March and the trails turned muddy. We switched from snowshoes to hiking boots, traded heavy coats for lighter jackets. Lawrence paired me with Karen for most patrols. She'd been at the station 3 years, longer than anyone except Lawrence himself. Knew the rules inside and out, never took chances. "You're lucky to be alive," she told me during a patrol near Moose Lake. "I know. Brian was a good ranger, 7 years experience, but his compass spun and something got him anyway. He didn't run fast enough? Maybe. Or maybe he hesitated, tried to figure out what was happening instead of just running. We checked trail markers, cleared some deadfall from the path, standard spring maintenance. The forest looked different without snow cover. More open, but somehow less friendly. Casey was smart, Karen said. Too smart. Lawrence said the same thing. Smart people always think they can solve problems, find explanations, but some things don't have explanations. Just rules. Just rules. We turned onto the trail toward Bass Lake, popular spot in summer but still quiet in early spring. The path wound through mixed forest, pine and birch and maple just starting to bud out. Karen stopped suddenly. "You see that?" I followed her gaze. About 20 feet ahead, beside the trail, sat a bright red toy truck. Looked like something a kid would play with in a sandbox. Maybe 6 inches long, plastic, with little black wheels. "Wasn't there yesterday," Karen said. "We'd patrolled this same trail the day before. I would have noticed a red truck. Someone must have dropped it. Maybe." But Karen didn't sound convinced. She pulled out her grabber tool and took a step toward the truck. Then it moved. Just a little. Rocked back and forth like someone had nudged it, but there was no wind, no breeze at all. "Did you see that?" I whispered. I saw it. The truck rocked again. More pronounced this time, tilting up on its back wheels before settling down. Karen grabbed my arm. "Back away, slowly." We took 3 steps backward. The truck stopped moving. "What the hell?" I said. "I don't know, but we're not touching it. It's just a toy." So was the wallet that got Lucas killed. We backed up another 10 feet. The truck sat motionless beside the trail, bright red against the brown earth. "We should report this," Karen said. "Report what? A toy truck? A toy truck that moves by itself." We radioed Lawrence from the trailhead, told him what we'd seen, gave him the exact location. He said he'd check it out himself. "Don't go back there today," he said. "Take the long route back to base." "Copy that." We hiked back on a different trail, adding 2 miles to our route. Neither of us talked much. I kept thinking about that truck, the way it rocked back and forth like invisible hands were playing with it. "You think it was really moving?" I asked. "We both saw it. Could have been an optical illusion, shadows, uneven ground." Karen gave me a look. "You sound like Casey." That shut me up. Casey had explanations for everything, too, right up until he walked out into the snow at 2:30 a.m. and never came back. Lawrence was waiting for us at the station. "I went to check on your truck." And? Gone. No sign it was ever there. "That's impossible. We both saw it." "I'm sure you did, but it's gone now." Lawrence sat down at his desk and opened a file folder, started writing notes. "What do you think it was?" I asked. "A test." "A test of what?" "Whether you'd follow the rules, whether you'd use the grabber tool or try to pick it up with your hands." "But we didn't touch it at all." "Exactly. That's why you're both still here." Lawrence looked up from his paperwork. "The forest knows we're here. It knows about the rules, and it keeps trying to get us to break them. The forest, whatever's out there, it wants us to fail, wants us to think we're smarter than the rules." I thought about Casey again, about Brian, about all the photos on the wall. "How many tests have there been?" "Dozens. Moving objects, strange sounds, things that don't belong, all designed to make us curious, make us careless. And if we fail, you know what happens if we fail." Lawrence went back to his notes. Karen and I finished our patrol reports in silence. That night I lay in my bunk thinking about the red truck, how it rocked back and forth with no wind to move it, how it disappeared before Lawrence could find it. The forest was testing us, seeing if we'd break the rules. And every test was a chance to end up like Casey, like Brian, like all the others. But we'd passed this one. backed away instead of investigating, reported it instead of trying to solve it ourselves. Lawrence was right. The rules weren't just suggestions. They were the only thing standing between us and whatever was waiting in the woods. I pulled the covers up and tried to sleep. Tomorrow there would be more patrols, more tests, more chances to make fatal mistakes. But tonight, we were alive, and that was enough. Summer came fast that year. Snow melted off the trails by early May, and by June we were dealing with mosquitoes instead of frostbite. The work didn't change much, though. Same patrols, same radio check-ins, same careful attention to the compass needle. I'd gotten good with the grabber tool. Real good. Found myself using it for everything now, even stuff that probably didn't need it. Coffee cups left on picnic tables, fishing lures caught in tree branches, candy wrappers blown off the trail. Lawrence never said anything about being too careful, so I kept grabbing. The compass stayed steady most days, needle pointing north like it should. No wobbling, no spinning. I'd check it every few minutes out of habit now. Glance down, see that steady needle. Keep walking. Karen said I was getting paranoid about it, but Karen hadn't lost a partner to spinning metal. "You're checking that thing every 30 seconds, she said during a patrol near Butterfly Lake in July. Temperature was around 75, which felt like a heat wave after the winter we'd had. "Every few minutes," I said. "Every 30 seconds. I looked down at the compass in my hand. Hadn't even realized I'd pulled it out again. Better safe than sorry. Brian used to do the same thing his last month," she said. Drove me crazy. I clipped the compass back to my belt. Brian's boots are in evidence storage. That shut her up for a while. The first time my compass went crazy that summer was mid-July. We were heading toward Disappointment Lake, about 2 miles out from base. Hot day, maybe 80 degrees, which was unusual for up here. I was sweating through my uniform shirt. I checked the compass like always. Needle was pointing northeast instead of north. Not spinning, just wrong. I stopped walking and held it level, thinking maybe I'd bumped it or something. The needle swung to east, then southeast. Then it started moving faster. "Karen," I said. She turned around. "What?" "Compass is moving." She pulled out her own compass. The needle was spinning slow at first, then picking up speed. Within 10 seconds, both our compasses looked like pinwheels. "Run," Karen said. We ran. Didn't look back. Didn't try to figure out what was happening. Just ran straight back toward base. My compass kept spinning the whole way until we hit the parking lot. Then it stopped dead, needle pointing north again like nothing had happened. Lawrence came out of the station. "Compass?" "Both of them," Karen said. "About 2 miles out toward Disappointment Lake." "Anyone else out there today?" "Not on the schedule." Lawrence nodded. "We'll mark it off limits for the week. Good work following protocol." The second time was 3 weeks later. Same area, same result. Compass started spinning. We ran back. Lawrence marked it off limits. I was starting to think something had moved into that part of the forest. Something that didn't like metal pointing north. August brought the laughter back. I was doing an evening patrol, about 6:30. Sun still up, but getting low. Temperature was perfect, maybe 70 degrees with a light breeze. Nice evening for a walk if you ignored where you were walking. I heard it around mile marker 3. High-pitched giggling, like kids playing hide-and-seek. Multiple voices, maybe 4 or 5 children. Sound was coming from the trees off to my left. My hand went to my sidearm before my brain caught up. The laughter got closer, moving through the trees parallel to the trail. Then it moved ahead of me. Then behind me. Then all around like they were playing some kind of game. I drew my weapon. No hesitation this time, no thinking about it. Just drew and aimed at my right foot. The laughter was getting louder, more excited, like they knew I was listening. I pulled the trigger. The pain hit like a hammer, sharp and bright. Blood started seeping through my boot immediately. The laughter stopped like someone had flipped a switch. Total silence except for my own breathing and the ringing in my ears from the gunshot. I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Collins. Rule 3 compliance, requesting immediate extraction." "Copy that, Collins," Ava's voice came back. "Medical en route. Can you make it to the trailhead?" I looked down at my foot. Blood was pooling around my boot, but I could still put weight on it. "Affirmative. Moving to extraction point now." The walk back took 20 minutes. Each step sent pain shooting up my leg, but I'd done this before. Knew what to expect. Lawrence and Karen were waiting with the ambulance when I limped out of the trees. "Same location as last time?" Lawrence asked as the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance. "About a quarter mile further north," I said. 4 or 5 voices this time. "We'll check it out." The ride to Duluth was getting familiar. Same paramedic. Same questions about how the accident happened. I gave the same answers about cleaning my weapon and accidental discharge. Nobody believed it, but nobody pushed too hard either. Dr. Patterson was waiting in the emergency room. She looked at me and shook her head. "You again. Me again. Same foot? Other foot this time." She examined the wound while I sat on the table. Entry and exit wounds, clean holes through the outer edge. Missed the important bones again, though it hurt like hell. "You know," she said while cleaning the wound, "most people who shoot themselves accidentally don't do it twice. I'm unlucky. Or very lucky, depending on how you look at it." She started bandaging my foot. "This is deliberate, isn't it? The angle, the placement. You're doing this on purpose." I didn't answer. "Why?" she asked. Lawrence stepped into the room. "Dr. Patterson, could we have a moment?" She looked back and forth between us. "This is my patient, Chief Lawrence. I understand, but there are some things you need to know about our work up there." She finished the bandage and stepped back. "I'll give you 5 minutes. Then I want to know why my patient keeps shooting himself in the foot." Lawrence waited until she left, then pulled a chair close to the bed. Same laughter. Multiple voices, circling around me like they were playing a game. "You followed protocol immediately?" "Soon as I heard them. No hesitation." Lawrence nodded. "Good man. We found something else out there today." "What kind of something?" "Another body. Hiker named Tom Brennan reported missing 3 days ago. Found him about 50 yards from where you shot yourself." I felt cold despite the warm room. "Same as Gardner?" "Worse. Brennan's face was carved up like someone took a knife to it. Smile went from ear to ear, literally. Eyes were gone completely. Hands pressed against his ears so hard his fingers went through the skin. Jesus. Rule 3 saved your life again, Collins. Whatever's out there, it doesn't like the sound of gunshots. Or maybe it just respects people who follow the rules." Dr. Patterson came back in. "Time's up. I want answers." Lawrence looked at me, then back at her. "Doctor, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. Try me." So Lawrence told her. About the rules, about the disappearances, about the things in the forest that didn't show up on any wildlife survey. He kept it simple, just the facts. Dr. Patterson listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You're telling me Don shot himself to avoid being killed by invisible children?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. And you have evidence of this?" 14 missing rangers and 2 dead hikers in the past year. She looked at my bandaged foot, then back at Lawrence. "This is insane." "Yes, ma'am, it is." "But you believe it." "I've seen the bodies, doctor. I've seen what happens when people don't follow the rules." She turned to me. "And you? You believe this?" I thought about Gardner's face, about Brian's empty boots, about the laughter circling through the trees. I believe staying alive. She prescribed pain medication and gave me care instructions for the bandage. Same routine as before. Keep it clean, change the dressing daily, Come back if there's infection. She didn't ask any more questions about why I'd shot myself. Either you're the smartest ranger in Minnesota, she said as I was leaving, or the craziest. Both, I said. Fall came early that year. Leaves started changing in September, and by October we were back to needing jackets for morning patrols. The tourists cleared out after Labor Day, which made our job easier. Fewer people to redirect, fewer chances for civilians to wander into the wrong areas. I was scheduled for a 3-day patrol in mid-October, checking trail conditions and updating winter closure signs. Remote area near the Canadian border, about 15 miles from base. Lawrence didn't like sending people out alone for overnight trips, but we were short-staffed again and the work needed doing. Radio check every 2 hours, he said while going over my route. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you abort and come back. What about the overnight protocol? There's a ranger cabin at mile marker 12. You'll stay there both nights. Cabin's been cleared for emergency use. I looked at the map. The cabin sat in a small clearing about a quarter-mile off the main trail. Built in the 70s as a fire watch station, now used for extended patrols when rangers couldn't make it back to base. What about the 1 to 4 rule? Cabin counts as base for overnight stays, but you follow the same protocol. No going outside between 1 and 4 a.m., no matter what you hear. The first day went smooth. Checked trail markers, cleared some fallen branches, updated signs about winter closures starting in November. Weather was perfect, about 50 degrees with clear skies. My foot was still sore from the August shooting, but the limp was barely noticeable now. I reached the cabin around 4:30 in the afternoon. Small building, maybe 20 by 20 feet, with a wood stove and basic supplies. Solar panel on the roof powered a radio and some LED lights. 2 windows, one facing the trail and one facing the back clearing. I set up my gear and made dinner on the camp stove. Beans and rice, nothing fancy. Radioed base at 6 to confirm arrival and status. Everything normal, no problems. The sun set around 7. I kept the lights low and read training manuals until about 10, then got ready for bed. Set my watch alarm for 5 a.m. and double-checked the radio battery. At midnight, I got up and checked the door. Solid wood with a heavy deadbolt. I turned the bolt and pushed a chair against the door for good measure. Then I checked the windows. Both had sturdy latches that I locked tight. Lawrence had been clear about the protocol. Stay inside, no matter what. Don't look outside unless absolutely necessary. Don't respond to sounds. Wait for dawn. I lay in my bunk and listened to the forest. Normal sounds at first. Wind in the trees, small animals moving through the underbrush, an owl hooting somewhere in the distance. I checked my watch every few minutes. 12:15, 12:30, 12:45. At 1:15, something started walking around the cabin. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate. Not an animal. Too regular. Too purposeful. Something walking on 2 legs, moving in a slow circle around the building. I could hear each step clearly, the crunch of dead leaves under whatever was out there. I stayed in my bunk and didn't move. Didn't go to the window. Didn't call out. Didn't reach for my radio. Just lay there and listened to the footsteps going around and around. The steps were methodical. Same pace, same interval between each one. Like someone measuring the distance around the cabin, counting off paces. Around and around, never stopping, never changing speed. I looked at my watch. 1:30. The footsteps continued. 1:45. Still walking. 2 a.m. Around and around. At 2:15, I couldn't help myself. I got up quietly and moved to the window facing the trail. Lifted the edge of the curtain just enough to see out. Nothing. The clearing was empty, pale in the moonlight, but I could still hear the footsteps, clear as anything. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Circling the cabin like whatever was out there was wearing a path in the ground. I let the curtain fall and went back to my bunk. The walking continued. 2:30, 2:45, 3 a.m. The footsteps never stopped, never varied. Same steady pace, same route around the building. I started counting the steps between circuits. 47 steps. Then the sound would move past the front door and start around again. 47 steps every time. At 3:30, I was wondering if I was losing my mind. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. Maybe I was hearing things that weren't there. But the footsteps were real. I could feel them through the floor, small vibrations with each step. Whatever was out there had weight, had substance. It was real. 4 a.m. came and went. The footsteps continued. 4:01, 4:02, 4:03. At 4:04, the footsteps stopped. Complete silence. No wind, no animals, nothing. Like the forest was holding its breath. I lay in my bunk until dawn, listening to nothing. When the sun came up, I checked my watch. 5:15. I'd been awake for almost 4 hours. I got dressed and made coffee, then unlocked the door and stepped outside. The morning air was cold and clean. Birds were singing in the trees. Everything looked normal. I walked around the cabin looking for tracks, found them immediately. Perfect circle of footprints in the soft earth, maybe 6 feet out from the walls. The prints were strange, though. Smooth depressions in the dirt, like someone wearing shoes with no tread, no detail, no pattern. Just oval shapes pressed into the ground. I counted the prints. 47 between the front door and the back corner. 47 between the back corner and the side. 47 all the way around. The circle was perfect. No deviation, no places where the walker had stepped closer to or further from the cabin. Just a perfect ring of smooth footprints with no beginning and no end. I radioed base at 6 a.m. Collins to base. Status normal. Overnight stay completed without incident. Copy that, Collins. Lawrence's voice came back. Any problems? I looked at the circle of prints around the cabin. No problems. Continuing patrol as scheduled. I finished the patrol and made it back to base 2 days later. Lawrence asked about the overnight stay and I told him it went fine. Didn't mention the footsteps or the circle of prints. Some things you keep to yourself. But I knew what I'd heard. Something had walked around that cabin for 3 hours straight, measuring out a perfect circle in the dark. Something that left smooth footprints with no detail. Something that stopped walking at exactly 4:01 a.m. Lawrence knocked on my door around 8 in the morning. I'd been up for an hour already, making coffee and looking out at the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. Must have been 3 or 4 inches. Come in, I called. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. Had that serious look he got when something important was happening. Coffee's fresh, I said, pointing at the pot. Thanks. He poured himself a cup and sat down at my kitchen table. We need to talk. I sat across from him. What's going on? Karen's transferring out, he said. Requested it last week. She's had enough. That surprised me. Karen had been solid for 3 years, never broke a rule, never complained about the weird stuff we dealt with. Where's she going? Yellowstone, normal ranger work. Bears and tourists instead of whatever the hell we've got here. I sipped my coffee. Couldn't blame her. 3 years of following rules that made no sense to anyone outside this place would wear on anybody. So we're down to 3 rangers, I said. 2, actually. Ava's still green. Barely been here 6 months. Lawrence leaned back in his chair, which brings me to why I'm here. I waited. I'm promoting you to senior ranger, he said, effective immediately. That caught me off guard. I'd been at the station 1.5 years, but senior ranger meant training new people, teaching them the rules, making sure they understood what happened if they screwed up. You sure about that? You followed every rule perfectly, Lawrence said. 3 times you've shot yourself in the foot when you heard the laughter. That shows discipline. Shows you understand what's at stake. I thought about Brian's empty boots, Gardner's carved smile, Casey's footprints ending at nothing. What does Senior Ranger mean exactly? You'll train the new recruits, teach them the rules, show them how to use the equipment. He paused. And you'll decide if they're ready for solo patrols. That was a lot of responsibility. Making the wrong call could get someone killed. When do I start? Today. We've got a rookie coming in this afternoon, fresh out of the academy. Lawrence finished his coffee. Her name's Ava Graves, 26 years old, top of her class. What's her background? Military police for 4 years, then forestry degree. Smart, disciplined, good physical condition. He stood up. But she doesn't know about the rules yet. I nodded. That was always the hardest part. Explaining to someone that everything they thought they knew about ranger work didn't apply here. I'll handle it, I said. Good. She'll be here around 2. Lawrence headed for the door, then stopped. Don, these new people look up to senior rangers. They need to see that following the rules keeps you alive. After he left, I sat at the table thinking about what he'd said. Karen had lasted 3 years by following every rule exactly. Now she was getting out while she still could. Smart move, probably. I got dressed and headed to the station around 10. Ava was already there, sitting at Casey's old desk with paperwork spread out in front of her. She looked up when I walked in. "You must be Don Collins," she said, standing up. "I'm Ava Graves." She was about 5'5", athletic build, with short black hair and dark brown eyes. Her uniform was crisp and new, like she'd pressed it that morning. "Welcome to the station," I said. "How was the drive up?" "Not bad. Left Minneapolis around 6. She gestured at the paperwork. "Chief Lawrence has me filling out forms." "Standard procedure. You'll be doing a lot of paperwork here." She laughed. "So I've heard, though I have to ask about something." She pointed at the wall behind Lawrence's desk. "Those photos, are they former Rangers?" I looked at the wall. 15 photos now, arranged in 3 rows of 5. Brian, Gardner, Casey, all the others who'd come before. "They are," I said. "Where are they now?" That was always the question. I pulled out my wallet and took out the laminated card Lawrence had given me on my first day. The edges were worn from handling, but the 4 rules were still clear. "Read this first," I said, handing it to her. She read it silently, her expression changing as she went through each rule. When she finished, she looked up at me. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke." "Shoot yourself in the foot if you hear children laughing?" She laughed nervously. "Come on." I pulled up my pant leg and showed her the scars on my left foot. 3 small round marks where bullets had gone through. "I've done it 3 times, I said. "Each time it saved my life." Her laugh died. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." I pointed at the wall of photos. "Everyone up there broke one of those rules. That's why they're not here anymore." She stared at the photos, then back at the card. "What do you mean they're not here anymore?" "They disappeared. We find their boots sometimes, but that's it." Lawrence came out of his office and joined us. "Ava, I see Don's showing you the rules." "Chief Lawrence, with respect, this doesn't make any sense," she said. "Children laughing in the woods isn't dangerous. Compasses spin when there's magnetic interference, and shooting yourself in the foot is just self-harm." "Show her Gardner's file," I said to Lawrence. Lawrence went to his filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder. He handed it to Ava, who opened it and started reading. I watched her face as she went through the incident report, the crime scene photos, the coroner's findings. "This says his face was carved ear to ear," she said quietly. "That's what happens when you hear the laughter and don't follow Rule 3, Lawrence said. She flipped through more pages. "And his eyes were removed. We've found 4 bodies like that over the past 2 years, I said. All of them heard children laughing. All of them failed to shoot themselves. Ava closed the file and handed it back to Lawrence. She was quiet for a long minute. "Assuming this is real," she said finally, "what exactly is out there?" "We don't know," Lawrence said. "We just know the rules keep you alive." "Have you ever seen anything?" "No," I said, "but I've heard things. Footsteps around cabins at night, laughter in empty woods, sounds that don't belong." She picked up the rule card again and read it more carefully. "Never leave the base between 1 and 4 a.m. What happens if you do?" "Ask Dean Casey," Lawrence said, pointing at one of the photos. "He lasted 5 days. How did he die?" "We don't know if he's dead," I said. "We just know he left the station at 2:30 in the morning, and all we found were his boots." Ava looked at the photos again, studying each face. 15 people. 15 people who thought they knew better than the rules, Lawrence said. She was quiet again, processing everything. I could see her trying to make sense of it, looking for logical explanations that would make the rules unnecessary. "I want to see where these incidents happened," she said. "Not yet," I said. "First you learn the basics. How to use the grabber tool, radio procedures, patrol routes. After a few weeks, if you're ready, we'll take you to some of the sites. I need to understand what I'm dealing with." "You're dealing with something that kills people who don't follow 4 simple rules," Lawrence said. "That's all you need to understand right now." I spent the rest of the morning going over equipment with her, showed her the grabber tool, how to extend it and work the mechanical fingers, explained radio protocols, check-in procedures, emergency codes, went through the map and marked the main patrol routes. "Always carry your compass," I said, handing her a military-style compass like mine. "Check it every few minutes. If it starts spinning, run back to base immediately." "What if I'm miles out?" "Run anyway. Don't stop. Don't investigate. Don't try to figure out what's causing it. Just run." She clipped the compass to her belt, and the grabber tool. Never touch anything with your bare hands. Trash, personal items, anything you find on the trails. Use the grabber tool every time. What happens if I touch something directly? I thought about Clay Lucas, whose boots they'd found the morning after he picked up a wallet. "You disappear." We broke for lunch around noon. Ava asked more questions about the missing rangers, the incident sites, the evidence they'd found. I answered what I could, but there wasn't much to say. People broke the rules and vanished. That was the pattern. "Has anyone ever survived breaking a rule?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not once." "So the rules are absolute. Completely absolute. No exceptions, no special circumstances, no judgment calls. You follow them exactly or you end up on that wall." After lunch, I took her on her first patrol. Short loop, just 2 miles to get her used to the routine. Temperature was around 20 degrees with a light wind that made it feel colder. "Stay close," I said as we headed into the trees. "Watch what I do." We followed the blue trail markers through dense pine forest. I checked my compass every few minutes, showed her how to scan the area, pointed out landmarks she'd need to remember. "It's quiet," she said after we'd been walking for 20 minutes. "Always is in winter. Most of the wildlife's either hibernating or moved south. No, I mean really quiet. Like dead quiet." She was right. No wind in the trees, no birds, no small animals moving through the underbrush, just our footsteps crunching in the snow. "You'll get used to it," I said, though the silence bothered me too. We found a plastic water bottle half buried near a tree trunk. I pulled out the grabber tool and demonstrated how to pick it up without touching it directly. "Seems excessive for a water bottle," Ava said. "Maybe. But Lucas thought the same thing about a wallet." I dropped the bottle in our trash bag. Better excessive than dead. We finished the patrol without incident and got back to the station around 4. Lawrence was at his desk doing paperwork. "How'd it go?" he asked. Good, I said. She's got good instincts, follows directions. I still have questions, Ava said. Questions are fine, Lawrence said. Just don't let them make you careless. That evening, I sat in my cabin, going over training materials, planning out the next few weeks. Ava seemed smart and disciplined, but I'd thought the same thing about Casey. The rules sounded crazy to anyone hearing them for the first time. The trick was getting people to follow them anyway. I looked at my own copy of the rules, the laminated card I'd carried for a year and a half. 4 simple sentences that meant the difference between going home at night and ending up as a photo on Lawrence's wall. The scars on my feet ached in the cold. 3 times I'd heard the laughter. 3 times I'd pulled the trigger. Better scars than standing boots, like I'd told Ruby Patterson. But I wondered how many more times I'd have to shoot myself before something else got me. Outside, the wind picked up and snow started falling again. Tomorrow I'd take Ava on a longer patrol, show her more of the area. Keep teaching her the rules until they became automatic. Because in this place, automatic was the only way to stay alive. 5 years went by faster than I thought they would. I'm still here, still checking my compass every 30 seconds, still using the grabber tool for everything, still carrying that .22 caliber bullet in my pocket, though I've gone through a lot more bullets than just the one Lawrence gave me that first day. 7 times now. 7 times I've heard children laughing in the woods and put a bullet through my foot. Left foot got 4 of them, right foot got 3. Ruby Patterson stopped asking questions after the 3rd visit. Just patches me up and sends me home with pain pills, and that look doctors get when they know something's wrong but can't prove it. The scars don't hurt as much anymore, except when it's really cold. Then they ache like hell. I've trained 16 new rangers in those 5 years. 12 of them are gone now. Their boots are in evidence storage with all the others, lined up in neat rows like Lawrence keeps everything else around here. Ava made it 8 months before she decided to investigate some footprints she found near Disappointment Lake. Marcus lasted 6 weeks, thought the rules were suggestions. Jenny followed them perfectly for 2 years. Then her compass started spinning near Eagle's Nest and she froze instead of running. By the time we found her boots, they were covered in snow. The ones who made it transferred out. Can't blame them. This isn't the kind of job you do for a career. It's the kind that either kills you or teaches you things you wish you didn't know. Lawrence retired 3 years ago. Moved to Florida, he said. Somewhere warm where the only thing that spins is ceiling fans. David Reeves took over as station chief. He's younger than Lawrence was, maybe 45, but he's got the same look in his eyes. The look that says he's seen things he can't explain and learned not to question what works. Reeves came up from Voyageurs National Park, spent his first week reading through all the incident reports, studying the photos, asking questions. Then he went out on patrol with me and heard the laughter for himself. Didn't hesitate when I told him to shoot his foot. Smart man. He's been here 3 years now and hasn't lost a ranger yet, but that's mostly because we've gotten better at screening applicants. These days, I'm the one who gives new recruits the talk. Show them the wall of photos, hand them the laminated card, explain about the grabber tool. Some of them laugh. Those ones don't usually make it past the interview. The ones who listen, who ask serious questions, who look at my scars and understand what they mean, those are the ones we keep. I've gotten good at reading people. You have to, in this job. The cocky ones who think they know better, the curious ones who want to understand why, the scared ones who follow rules because they're terrified. The scared ones do best. Fear keeps you alive out here. My compass has spun 43 times in 5 years. I count them. Each time I run back to base, heart pounding, legs burning, knowing that whatever's out there wanted to be found and I didn't let it happen. We mark those areas off limits for a week, then try again. Sometimes the problem moves. Sometimes it stays put. There's no pattern I can see, but I stopped looking for patterns after the 2nd year. Patterns are for things that make sense. The forest doesn't make sense. I've seen things I don't talk about in my reports. Footprints that appear overnight in perfect circles around the station. Trees that weren't there the day before, standing exactly where we found someone's boots. Sounds that don't match any animal I know, coming from directions where nothing lives. But I follow the rules, so I'm still here to see them. Rule 4 saved my life more times than I can count. Those nights when something walks around the cabin, testing doors and windows, counting steps like it's measuring something. I stay in my bunk, door locked, chair wedged under the handle, waiting for 4 a.m. when whatever it is goes away. Sometimes I hear voices outside. Sometimes they sound like rangers who disappeared. Sometimes they sound like people I know are still alive, calling for help. But I don't open the door. Rule 4 exists for a reason. The grabber tool is like an extension of my hand now. I can pick up a dime with it, pluck a leaf from a branch, collect evidence without ever touching anything directly. New rangers think it's excessive until they see what happened to the ones who didn't use it. We've got photos of that too, though we don't show them unless we have to. Some things are better described than seen. I've run training exercises where I drop a wallet on the trail and watch the new recruit's reaction. The ones who reach for it with bare hands get sent home. The ones who stop, think, then use the grabber tool. Those ones might make it. It's a simple test, but it tells you everything you need to know about whether someone can follow rules that don't make sense. The children's laughter is the worst part. It always sounds so real, so innocent. Like kids playing hide and seek in the woods, having the time of their lives. Your brain wants to investigate, wants to help, wants to understand why children would be out there alone. But I've learned to trust the rules more than my instincts. The moment I hear that laughter, my hand goes to my weapon. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just draw, aim, fire. It saves my life every time. 7 bullets through 7 different spots on my feet. I've gotten good at picking locations that won't hit bone, won't cause permanent damage. The pain is sharp and immediate, but it stops the laughter. Always stops the laughter. Whatever makes that sound, it doesn't like the smell of blood. Or maybe it just knows the rules too. Knows that someone who will shoot themselves to follow protocol isn't going to break easy. Ruby Patterson retired last year. New doctor at the hospital is named Mitchell, and he asks fewer questions than Ruby did. Just treats the wounds, prescribes the pills, tells me to stay off my feet for a few days. Maybe Ruby warned him about the rangers from the Boundary Waters. Maybe he's smart enough not to dig too deep into things he can't change. The scars are neat and small now. I've got the technique down to a science. .22 caliber doesn't do much damage if you place it right. Hurts like hell for a week, aches for a month, then settles into a dull throb when the weather changes. Small price to pay for staying alive. I think about the rangers who didn't make it, especially Brian, since he was my first partner. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there somewhere, if whatever took him kept him alive for some reason. But I know better than to wonder too hard. Wondering leads to investigating, and investigating gets you killed. The new recruits always ask the same questions. Why these rules? Why this place? What's really out there? I tell them what Lawrence told me. It doesn't matter why. What matters is following the rules exactly, every time without exception. The moment you start making exceptions, you end up as boots in evidence storage. Some of them push back, want scientific explanations, logical reasons, proof that the supernatural threats are real. I show them Gardner's file, let them read the autopsy report, explain about the carved faces and missing eyes. Most of them stop asking questions after that. The ones who don't usually don't last long. I've become good at my job in ways I never expected. Not just the ranger work, tracking, navigation, wilderness survival, but the other parts. Reading people, teaching rules, knowing when someone's about to break. It's like being a priest for a religion that worships survival. where the commandments are written on laminated cards and the punishment for breaking them is disappearing forever. 5 years, and I'm still here. Still following the rules. Still training new rangers who might or might not make it through their first month. Still checking my compass. Still using my grabber tool. Still carrying that bullet in my pocket. The forest is still out there, waiting. Testing us, watching us. Looking for the moment when someone gets careless or curious or brave. But as long as we follow the rules, as long as we remember that some things are more important than understanding, we stay alive. Most of us, anyway. I've learned to live with the not knowing. Learned that survival sometimes means accepting that the world contains things beyond explanation, and the smartest response isn't to figure them out, but to respect them. The rules work. That's enough. Tomorrow there'll be another patrol, another chance to follow protocol, another opportunity to stay alive by doing exactly what the laminated card says. I'll check my compass every 30 seconds, use my grabber tool for everything, listen for laughter I hope I don't hear, and make sure I'm back at base before 1 a.m. Because the rules aren't suggestions. They're not guidelines or recommendations or best practices. They're the difference between going home at the end of the day and becoming another pair of empty boots in evidence storage. And after 5 years of following them exactly, I'm still here to tell you that.